thoughts and our prayers are with her family and friends. I was delighted to see the work of one of our citizens had been recognised in Her Majesty's birthday honours. Eileen Fenton received the MBE for voluntary services to long distance and competitive swimming coaching in the Yorkshire and Great Britain. Congratulations to her. Thank you, colleagues. That concludes my announcements. As no deputations have been received for today's meeting, we will now move on to agenda item number 6, which is the Leader's Report. Once the Leader has presented his report, he will answer any questions from members on the matters raised in his report. A maximum of 30 minutes will be allowed for questions and answers. And just to tell you that what we're going to try and do this time, when you're on timings, if you've got, let's say, 5 minutes to speak, what I will be doing is you'll see this light up with 20 seconds to go. So that should tell you that you should be wrapping up your speech. But first of all, can I introduce the Leader's Report, and over to Councillor Box.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Can I associate myself with the comments you've made about Molly Wright, someone who I knew and worked with for many years on the council, and I'm sure everybody would agree that we write to her family, expressing our condolences. In early May, Mr Mayor, I met the Mayor of Nanning, and Councillor Harvey was good enough to be there as well, and she helped during the day. A really, really good meeting with our colleagues from that city, as a result of which we have signed a friendship agreement with them, and they are very keen to develop a long-term relationship that would benefit both our cities. We have in fact received an invitation from Nanning to attend an exhibition, a business exhibition that's being held in their city in September. So we're hoping that we can arrange for people in business, together with members of the council, to accept that invitation. As colleagues know, we at the last meeting debated the climate emergency resolution. I want to raise two issues arising from that. The first is that I think I have now got a resolution, or an amendment actually, to a resolution that's on the LGA agenda for its annual meeting in July, which is asking the LGA to declare a climate emergency on behalf of the whole of local government. I know we've got representatives from the Liberal Democrats and from Conservatives who obviously got connections with other councils, and in view of the fact that that resolution was passed unanimously, hopefully you can use your good officers to try and ask any councillors that you know to try and support that resolution. And I think it was Councillor Gordon that actually raised the point about whether we should set up a separate body, I think it was, to look at what should be done rather than go to Cabinet. I'm not a great believer in setting up new bodies for the sake of it when we have existing structures. So what I've asked the Chief Executive to do is to actually refer that resolution to scrutiny, so that obviously scrutiny is made up of elected members from all parties and also includes members of the public, so that scrutiny would have the opportunity of actually looking at it. And again, looking at what we can do quickly, and I think that was a point that was raised as well at the last meeting, and then look at what we need to do in the short term and in the long term. The intention would be that the scrutiny committee would then refer that to Cabinet, and then it could come back here finally for a further debate and to make sure that it is effectively monitored. It's all very well saying we'll do this, that and the other, but we need to make sure there is effective monitoring. On Monday of next week, Mr Mayor, the first meeting of Wakefield's High Street Task Force meets. It has attracted media attention because I think we are one of the first councils to actually create a High Street Task Force, and I'm led to believe that the BBC have asked if they can attend, and I've suggested that it would be a really good thing if they do to report on what's happening. Excuse me. It's really important, and I've spoken to Denise about this morning, that the task force doesn't simply look at the city of Wakefield. We've got to look at what's happening right across the district in all our towns, and indeed in some of the smaller communities, to make sure that the issues that all of us face, whatever the size of our town or our community, are addressed. So again, that will be something that we can report back to the next council meeting. I hate to mention devolution, but I feel I have to. Negotiations are progressing now with government. As you know, South Yorkshire have now agreed that they will implement the South Yorkshire devolution deal. That has meant that the rest of Yorkshire is having to look at the kind of model that we need in the short term, because it's still a long-term goal of many people to create a single Yorkshire combined authority. But there's clearly now no way that that will happen in the very near future. On behalf of the council, I've asked that in preparing the devolution deal and in talks with government, we have a separate funding stream made available for towns. What we've got to do is to make sure that devolution benefits everybody, not just the big cities. Of course, Leeds is one of the big core cities, but within West Yorkshire, we've got smaller towns and communities that actually need help. So one of the things I've asked, and has been agreed, and is now being discussed, is what funding can be made available for towns. I can also tell council that the Chamber of Commerce have agreed that we should not pursue a one Yorkshire model at the moment. Their preferred choice is for something that is smaller, based in either West Yorkshire or the Leeds City region. To remind colleagues, I know you've probably got in your diaries already, but to remind colleagues, on the 6th of July, it's Armed Forces Day in Pontefract. It's a great day out. Anybody can attend, bring children along as well. There's something for everybody to do, and it's a great way to show our support for our armed service men and women. So I hope everybody will do the best to get there. I'm sure that many members of council, if not all members of council, have received representations, as I have, about the government refusing to fund TV licences for the over 75s. No, it's a big issue. Now, we know that it was in the Conservative election manifesto. We will not stop free TV licences for over 75s. Quite clear what was said. What the government did, of course, was to actually pass on responsibility, as they do, to the BBC, without making extra funding available. That is regrettable, and is actually an abdication of what was in the election manifesto. I think that we, as a council, should make it quite clear that we support free TV licences for over 75s, and I would ask council to consider whether or not we open a petition in the county hall and town hall for people to sign to say that they support what I've just said, that free TV licences should be available, but obviously members would wish to comment. On Friday of this week, I should be speaking at the Sculpture Park because we are launching the Yorkshire Sculpture International, which is a joint initiative between Wakefield and between Leeds. And if any of you read the Yorkshire Post on Saturday, you'll have seen a big story from Damien Hirst, who was exhibiting at the Sculpture Park, and it was a really good write-up. It will bring hundreds, if not thousands, of people into our district. So it's a great opportunity to showcase not just the Hepworth and not just the Sculpture Park, but the whole of the district. So hopefully, if you spread the word and try and get along to some of the events that are being held, that would be great. Can I also ask Council to confirm that Councillor Lynn Masterman, is appointed our Heritage Champion? I think it might be in Jackie's report. If it is Jackie, I apologise, but I wanted to make sure that Council did it formally today. And two final things. The first is Brexit. I, along with other Cabinet members, had a meeting with the Chief Executive and her senior team earlier this week, and we discussed Brexit to make sure that the local authority is as prepared as anybody can be for Brexit. And I'm assured by the Chief Executive that we are, and there are no serious concerns to report to Council today. But I can give the assurance that we are working closely with other colleagues, both in the police and other public sector organisations, to make sure there is minimum disruption depending on the kind of Brexit deal that we get. I mean, and I want to use this opportunity of just talking personally for a second. I voted to leave, is the truth. I know that Councillor Ahmed and I were on a TV programme, sorry, radio programme. We're not good enough for TV. We're on a radio programme together when I know Councillor Ahmed and I voted the same way. I would still vote the same way tomorrow, actually. But I know there are many people in this chamber who've got a different view to me, and I respect their view. I'm of a generation that actually respects people who've got a different point of view, and I know that colleagues who I respect immensely in this council chamber who feel that that they voted to remain and would still vote remain, and who may feel there should be a confirmatory referendum. My view is not to support that personally, because I don't think that politics has ever been at a lower ebb in terms of trust. And I don't think it's actually just parliamentarians. I think it's generally across the piece and across the world probably that people are turned off by politics. So for me, this really is an issue of trust, that people having voted the way they did, however narrow the margin, that result should be respected. That is the view I take. And I say, I hope you won't mind, Mr Mayor, me expressing my personal views on this subject. I say, but I do know I've got colleagues, and I spoke to a couple of them before the meeting, who've got equally strong views the other way. And that's both to be expected and to be respected. And finally, Mr Mayor, can I refer to Ofsted? As you know, we've had the Ofsted report. Can I say, I think it's unfortunate that the media have said, and I want to be quite exactly what they said, the media have said that the report says progress was too slow. Nowhere in the report is that said. Nowhere. Nowhere did it say that progress is too slow. Let me say this. I'm proud of the work that Beate and her colleagues and that Margaret have done, and I'm proud of the progress that has been made. But let me make it clear, both to Council and to the public, that we are not falling behind on our improvement plan, which was agreed by Ofsted and by the Commissioner. We are not falling behind. And in fact, we are on target to deliver the improvements as set out in the plan. Absolutely on target. And Ofsted in their letter recognise that. Recognise it. What we could do is what has happened in Surrey, a Conservative council. And in Surrey, what happened is they tried to fix everything overnight, and they failed, and they went back into special measures. That's what happened in Surrey. And to be fair, it's not only in Surrey, because I'm sure that Councillor Ahmed and others could give me examples of other councils of my political persuasion that have done the same thing. What we have to do is to make sure the improvements we make are measured and ones that will lead to long-term outcomes. That's what we have to do. And can I say this as well? That last week the Commissioner visited Wakefield. His report will be given to the Council on the 1st of July. And I give a public commitment that the Commissioner's report will be made public. And I think, hopefully, the Commissioner will make the point that he has no issues whatsoever in terms of the progress that this Council is making. So I say that report will be issued. I understand from the local media that Councillor Ahmed has asked me to resign. Of course, I will not be doing that. However, I would suggest that a person who doesn't go to improvement board meetings, doesn't attend anything, is not prepared to work with this council to make those long-term improvements, should himself consider his position and should stand down. That's what he should do. Now then, Margaret will deal with any details about the actual letter itself, but let's make sure that we recommit ourselves, all of us, to work together to make sure that these improvements that are being made are long-term improvements that benefit young people in this district. I'm committed to that. Every member of this Labour group is committed to that. It's about time Councillor Ahmed signed up to it himself.
Thank you. A maximum of 30 minutes have been set aside for any questions on Councillor Box's report. Are there any members? I've got Councillor Tully, and then followed by Councillor Ahmed, and then Councillor Jones. Councillor Tully.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Can I follow on what the leader of the council said regarding ex-councillor Molly Wright? Molly served our community for 40 plus years, and she was a good stalwart of our community and worked all her life for the betterment of our community. And Molly broke the mould. Molly worked tirelessly during the miners' strike and looked after families in South Kirby and Emsworth in the surrounding areas. And not only did she break the mould in a man's world of coal mining and trade unions, she became the first woman to be elected to the NUM. When they told her at South Kirby, women can't stand, she says, I'll show you who can stand. And she won. So Molly was a great servant of our community, and I would never let this come as I've known Molly all my life. I worked underground with her husband and her two sons at Frickley Colliery some years ago, and she was a great supporter of our party at this council. And on the other one that the council leader raised about free TV licences, I think it's important that people are made aware that when we talk about pension credit, there's two levels of pension credit. There's a guaranteed credit and there's a savings credit. People on savings credit don't fit into the same particular category as people on guaranteed pension credit. And lots of our elderly people in this community don't qualify for pension credit, and there might only be 50 pence or a pound the other way from it, but nevertheless are not rich by any stretch of the imagination. And it takes me back to 1994, and I'll finish on this, because in 1994 there were quite a few more veterans around than there was in 2019 when we had the 50th anniversary of D-Day. And in them days we took them onto the beach at Normandy, and they marched on the beach with the crutches. And what they didn't realise at the other end, the same Tory government were kicking the crutches from underneath them, because at the same time they were introducing major cuts to disability benefits, which savaged and ravaged some of these veterans in 1994, like they want to treat them in 2019.
Councillor Ahmed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just in terms to address the first issue that was raised about the TV licence, I think it's important to remember that it's not the Conservative government that's not doing the actually. It's actually BBC itself. But we need to. I know it affects. Got over it. Okay. So we'll carry on now and actually point out a few facts for you. We need to actually realise that the days of watching four channels on TV is well gone, and most people are getting digital channels free. So if you're going to do a petition, let's look forward. I know it's not Jurassic Park, and I know he still thinks he's in there, but at the moment, TV license, TV tax, that's what I call it. I don't think anyone should pay to watch a TV at home. And really, the only petition that should be coming forward from a council that pretends to be for working class people, or councillors that pretend, I think the only petition that should come out of this council chamber that I'm willing to sign up to is the abolishment of people paying for any form of tax on having a TV in their home, The BBC, like other organisations, can and should fund itself through advertising and go to the free market and do it in that way. That's the only thing that you should look at, really. And really, you should be taking a leaf out of Theresa May's book and knowing when the right time is to call it a day as a council leader. And in the report, I don't know if you've read the same report, so I'm assuming it's the monitoring inspection report. And if you look back on the council minutes, I suggested to you, all of you, at that time, that the cosy reports that you were putting in would all mean nothing until a monitoring report had been delivered in this chamber here. So we do have a monitoring report from the that's given to the council on the 14th of June 2019. Now, I think what you need to do is look at it carefully. Page 1, at the end, overview. Yeah, maybe hand out a copy to everybody as well. And it says, how the impact of planned action is too slow. Maybe I should have put that in capital letters for you. Now, I could go through that report and carry on going through that report. And there is, as I mentioned, the media has got it right, actually. So the Wakefield Express is referring to got the actual quotation right. And it was balanced in the way it was delivered. That actually, the report, the purpose of a monitoring report, and the commissioner, what you're not being told is, the purpose of a commissioner is not to come over and just take over things. They haven't got the capacity to do that. What they do is look at the capacity to deliver the improvement within the council. That's what they look at. So they look at your report and say, this is the capacity to improve. And if anyone can write a decent report, it's the actions that follow that report that the monitoring report then looks at. And that's the fact. That's what you should need to go away and check, actually. So the monitoring report is, in the way it's delivered and written in here, is not a positive report. And there's several paragraphs you can go through, and it says, for those people that maybe don't have that knowledge, and I don't expect everybody to have it, and it says there clearly that this front door service that it's referring to and the responses that are done are not being done in the way that they should be, and there's certain things that are being missed. And it says, and you can go to page 3 on there, and it says, not all children who have been identified at risk of significant harm, have had timely strategy discussions to understand and address this. So it goes through, and there is positive within the report, and I think that we need to acknowledge that as well. As an opposition, we need to acknowledge that as well. There is positive within the report that it does mention that there's been progress within the recruitment of social workers, etc., and all the other things on there, staff collaboration, although it mentions certain things, and we can go through different parts of the report. I think it's important that everybody in the council actually reads this report, and for that reason, the Conservative group, we actually all made sure that we read it and understood the key different parts of the report. But the report is not a good report, and I think you should have started with the report first, and I think actually it reflects on leadership within the council, and it's a dragging on leadership, and it's an outdated idea, and some of the stuff that you mention in your report suggests that as well. Working groups, I think people were told working groups are one of the things that somebody does on their way out. It's one of those things you'll blame a few people, blame the predecessor, probably did that a long time ago, blame something else, government, although different governments have been about, and finally what you do is set up a working group and finally acknowledge that you're at fault and resign. So obviously the problem is, if he resigns, it doesn't look much good, looking behind and looking at made-up portfolios, all the things that are happening in the council. It's not a good picture looking around. There's nobody to replace him as well, so he's got a problem on his hands. So the reality is he can't resign because he's got a problem on his hands, because there's not much going on there. In terms of the other items in the report that is mentioned, and it's important, I think that was the most important thing that you're acknowledging there, because if the children in this district, the children at most risk and harm, do not feel safe, or the monitoring report says that, then that says there's something seriously going wrong with the inspector, actually leadership management all over the place. Page 145, and we go through it, which means that the action plan actually is probably not meeting, the action plan has not delivered on what it set out to do. The council has a history, this council has a history of weaknesses in them areas. It's not the first time the report's been delivered. I know one person's resigned, and rightly so. I think it's time for other people to step aside and some fresh sort of ideas to come forward in the council that actually address this issue. And your own people did amendment, and in here, I think it was Councillor Tully that mentioned that if the pace of change was not good enough, or was not at the point, I think it was Councillor Eyre, then his leadership was in question. And I think I remember those words coming from Councillor Tully. I know he's honourable enough to repeat them. So I think there's a certain point where this is one monitoring visit and it's there in black and white. If there really have to be a question mark on leadership within the council, whether the political leadership is there to be able to improve this service.
Councillor Box.
My advice to you would be wait and see what the Commissioner says on the 1st of July. But you were so quick to rush to the press in the way that you did, that you didn't stop to think that the Commissioner is issuing his report on the 1st of July. You didn't do that. Nowhere in the comments you've made have you mentioned why you don't attend meetings. I can give you meetings of school governors you don't attend, by the way. So you don't attend meetings, and yet you profess to care about children. Well, how can that be? When you profess to care, you don't attend. How can that be?
That's actually incorrect information, so you need to withdraw that comment there.
How can that
incorrect
be?
Information.
Councillor Boxfield.
Yeah, it's a point of order though, so it's basically you're either lying or you incorrect information.
No.
You need to withdraw the
Thank
comment.
Wait a minute. Councillor Box finished, then I'll give you a chance to reply.
I withdraw nothing. Withdraw nothing. And actually, Ofsted said that they have no problem in terms of the pace at which we're going in terms of the improvement plan. That's not been an issue. And indeed, one of the problems we've got is this, that when Ofsted do come back, the framework under which they operate is not a framework that is able to look at an authority that has been deemed inadequate as we were. So it's looking at authorities as though they were good. Now, it's causing concern not just in Wakefield, but actually right across the country, which is why it's been taken up nationally. So that has been taken up nationally. Now, I have never and will never attack organisations that produce reports that are critical, because that is not the way to make sure that you improve. So the situation is that we are improving, that we are on track in terms of the improvement plan that has been issued and agreed by everybody. And if you attended meetings, Councillor Ahmed, which you don't, you know, it's no good looking down at your papers. You don't attend when you have a duty to do so. And then you turn around and try and lecture us. That's what you did before we got that first report, and you're still doing it now. I'm sure that Councillor Isherwood will be giving members details of all the meetings that you should have gone to, that you didn't. And it's for that reason you should stand down, because you're clearly not prepared to put in the work that's needed to work in a consensual way. You're not prepared to do it. Now, if you're not, stand down and let one of your colleagues take your place. And I never thought I'd agree with Andrea Jenkins, but I do on this occasion when she said you're ineffective.
Councillor Ahmed, are you saying that Councillor Box said something inaccurate and you want to set this record straight? Then just set that record straight.
I think what we do next time is actually film.
No, I'm asking you to set the record straight.
Well, it's light. So as simple as that.
I'm asking you to
governing
set...
body meeting has Nadeem Ahmed not attended. Light. That's what he is. He's running out of ideas, lying. Meeting. Let's be honest. Your meetings that you take place.
Councillor Ahmed, let me just come in
party
here.
meetings in your office.
Councillor Ahmed, I'm giving you the chance. I'm giving you the chance. I'm giving you the chance to set the record straight.
So you need to.
You're talking and not listening.
I am listening. So you need to.
So do you want me to stand up and call it to an halt?
Yeah, you can call it to a halt if you. Yeah. If you want to call it to a halt, let's call it to a halt.
What I'm giving you a chance to do is to answer the inaccuracies that you accused Councillor Box of, not go off onto one. And answer the thing, or I will stop it there.
If you need to stop it, you need to stop it. Okay, so basically, in terms of... Right, be quiet then, yeah? Okay, so in terms of the council meeting, if you ever have a meeting with any of these lot, you'll realise what sort of...
Councillor Ahmed, I'm sorry, stand down. Councillor Ahmed, I'm standing. I want you to be quiet now.
Close the meeting.
I want you to be quiet then. Not now, then. Please. I'm giving you a chance. You accused Councillor Box of lying. You said it was an inaccuracy. Then set the record straight, and once you've set the record straight, please sit down.
Okay, so going back to his made-up fantasy world, there is no governing body. Which one? He's just made up, makes up things, he thinks he can get away with it, and that's the actual reality of it. So what you need to do is go back, provide the factual evidence of that, or withdraw
Thank
it.
you, Councillor Ahmed. Please turn your microphone off. Thank you. Sit down. I have next Councillor Jeffrey.
Well, I wasn't going to say anything, but I'm absolutely appalled at your behaviour for a start. You've behaved disgracefully and insulted the Mayor. But to rush off to the press before we know where the report is, it's coming out on the 1st of July. You haven't attended any meetings at all. You profess to be an expert in Ofsted. You seem to have information that no one else has. You're always telling us what Ofsted will do and what they won't do and how you think we should do it. And yet you've shown no interest in getting involved with any meetings at all. You've just deliberately not attended. I know you work, I know that's difficult, but you could have asked some of your colleagues to attend. I think the way you've behaved is an absolute disgrace, and it's you that should resign.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm going to add an extra comment now, because obviously my role of scrutiny, chair of Children and Young People Services, because I have to say publicly that I've got every confidence in all the work that BRC and her team have done. We have attended many meetings, both in terms of scrutiny and in the improvement board where I sit and observe. And I have heard many positive things about the progress that is being made. So I need to make it clear, as chair of overview and scrutiny, of which there are members from the other side who attend, that there has been clear progress being made and a timetable is being adhered to. But I'm saying that because I know Margaret will be able to say a lot more than me on that one. But I just want to add a caveat to what the leader said with regards to, obviously, Brexit. Yeah, I voted Remain, and that's a position that changed, but I recognise, obviously, the democratic will of the people. My concern will remain post 31st of October that we ensure that we are protecting jobs, because this area was devastated years ago with regards to huge losses of jobs, and we cannot afford as an area again to lose all the manufacturing jobs that have come into this area in recent years. So I'm clearly wanting to accept that we have to ensure that the message goes out with regards to the deal that we are protecting all the jobs in this district, which both depend on European Union and obviously on other areas of the world. We have got to protect the jobs in this area. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
I've got Councillor Collins next.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. I just wanted to make a point that Steve did and Peter did on Molly. When I first met Molly, it was my first election campaign actually, and she was an absolute giant. And even though she weren't too well then, she was an absolute giant. She had some things to do. By the time I even got home, they were done and they were out and everything was sorted. And there were nobody in that campaign that could have done more for me than Molly, and she'll be missed. She gives so much of a life to our community, and she were our household name, and I know that all of our thoughts will be with the family at this time. And just on TV licences, Peter, you know, we can have political posturing from other side as much as we like, but what we actually want to do is stop something that is going to happen to the most vulnerable in our society. I think we should go further than having it in Town Hall and County Hall. I think we should put it in libraries and we should be advertising it, because what this government seems to be really good at doing is devolving cuts. So it's fine saying that this is the BBC's fault, but they set them up to fail already. They gave them this knowing that they could then say, "Ooh, we fulfilled our manifesto promise," because it's BBC that are doing it. And I think it's absolutely shameful that we've got the other side sat there posturing when it is their government that's responsible for it.
Can I say, I agree with what Councillor Collins has said, that we can do all those things. But we can also consider putting it on social media, the council's social media as well, to ask people to write in and let us know whether they support what we're wanting.
Can I just say I've got 5 members wishing to speak and have 12 minutes left. Councillor Martin Johnson next.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just going back to what Lou said earlier, I fully support having a record book in this place or the Town Hall for people to sign regarding their objections to the cutting BBC licence for the over 70s. And Councillor Ahmed is, is doing what the Tories do, cutting the BBC budget and having the BBC take these difficult decisions. Just like he did with the local authorities with social care, putting the 2% precept on, so we've got to fund the social care. So why doesn't Councillor Ahmed go back to his people in Westminster, or the one out with Andrew Jenkins, and say, let's cut the winter fuel allowance for the wealthiest of this country, and put that money into families that are in fuel poverty, or give it to the BBC so they don't have to cut the BBC licence for their over 70s, because those are the ones that need it, not the wealthiest of this country. Thank you.
Councillor Gordon.
Oh, there we go, I think wrong. Yeah, I've just got a few quick things. I'll try and be quick because I know time's running out. It was just really to acknowledge what Councillor Box has said in terms of putting the report for the climate emergency out to scrutiny. I think that's really something that's it's a good move for everyone, and we need to tackle these big issues collectively, because we're all trying to struggle on our own. We're not going to get anywhere, and I think that's something that I'm really happy to hear. And as well, in terms of getting other local government bodies, some which will be Liberal Democrat run, and other councillors that I know to support the motion going towards the LGA, that's obviously something again which is commendable, and we all on the same note of that we need to be working together. I'd just like to also come in on the TV licences part. I think one of the biggest issues that I've noticed, I did my Masters in Public Health and I looked at age-related cognitive decline as part of that, and one thing that seems to be missed in this debate, and one of the arguments that's been put forward about the TV licence, is that it's all that some people have in terms of company, and I think this is an issue that we need to look at more thought through and well-rounded, that we've got people who a TV is their only source of entertainment, only source of communication, and we need to be tackling social isolation as well as making sure that these people who are vulnerable aren't sat alone with a TV, because that's not a substitute for a health and social care system that's failing them. So on terms of the petition, I know Age UK have already been pushing one which is over 500,000 signatures. I don't know whether that would be something we'd be better linking in with, or how we'd go about that and pushing that. But I certainly think if as a council we could collectively try and go that step further, rather than just saying, oh, let's get the TV licence kept, say we need to be looking a sort of wholesale way at how we can make sure that people aren't in a situation where that is their only company and we're going to suffer. And following on from that, I think the other thing what I would say was just in terms of Brexit, obviously as a Liberal Democrat, I'm assuming my position is probably relatively clear on that. One of the things that I was elected on made clear that as a local government and a local body, that's not really my remit, that's for Westminster to deal with, but obviously we've got to consider the implications of the economy here in Wakefield, and I was just wondering if maybe Councillor Box would be able to sort of follow up. Obviously we're currently undergoing a Tory leadership contest that we've got every option on the table still, from a no deal, hard Brexit to a soft Theresa May deal. So, I mean, what sort of preparations of a council sort of looking at sort of following on from the leadership contest of the Tories, and how might we need to adjust Wakefield's strategy to deal with those? Thank you.
Councillor Box, do you want to reply?
Yeah, it was going so well there, Councillor Gordon, till we got to Brexit. Thank you for your comments on scrutiny, and also your offer to speak to your colleagues elsewhere. And I think the comment you made about TV licences, yeah, I think we could support that as well. In terms of Brexit, I suppose the key issues are transport and making sure that there are no shortages. As you know, a lot of things that come into the country, in particular food, is on a very short supply chain. So we're going to make sure that those are the two big things. It all depends, of course, on the kind of Brexit that we get. In another role I've got through the LGA, been speaking to government about, I'll give you one example about care workers. A lot of care workers in the country are from the EU. So what happens if there were to be a no-deal Brexit and they were to leave because they felt that their career was better elsewhere? That would give us a huge, huge problem. So all these issues have been raised nationally. We feed in, as Wakefield, into Tom Raden at Leeds, who is the link CX with government. So there's a two-way dialogue. what we can do as we get nearer, we've got more of an idea about the kind of Brexit we get, or if we get a Brexit at all, whatever, we can ask officer colleagues to make members aware of any potential issues that we've got, so that we in our communities can talk to them. So that's, I think, the two big issues are transport and supplies.
Thank you. Can I have Councillor Alan Garbutt next?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It was about TV licence. Martin Johnson made the point probably better than I would have made, but what I would ask Councillor Ahmed, would you make a positive statement in the supporting of a potential petition? Thank you.
Okay, I've got two left. Councillor Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Regards TV licences, I don't want old people to go without a TV licence. I don't think any of my colleagues do. And I also think that while we're going government, BBC, how BBC can take that off old people while they're still paying their own selves fat cat salaries is wrong. And that is the issue that needs to be addressed with the BBC, because they are greedy, and that is our money that they're paying themselves with, but they're denying old people a TV licence, and that is the issue that needs looking at here. Thank you.
Councillor Cruz, and finally Councillor Betty Rhodes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I think, being sat in this chamber quite a few years, I have never seen such a despicable, disgraceful attitude by any member in this council to the mayor that I've seen today. And I think it's time that if new members or old members do not know the protocol of when the mayor stands on his feet, no matter what the issue is, the elected member sits down in respect of the mayoral position. And let's get some training done if that needs to be done to show respect to this council. And as for the try to deflect from Mr. elected member Ahmed on his position on the improvement plan, it's a disgrace that you can sit here and actually think you can lecture, when if you have these feelings that you have so much to give, you should be there supporting them and giving those views at those meetings. Otherwise, get somebody else, as the leader says, to do it for you. But this is not the way to deflect from your inadequacies. And lastly, the TV licences. I can recall when George Osborne stood up in government on about passing the responsibility for funding over to the BBC. It was an old Etonian act of passing the buck to somebody else, all Etonians together. And in fact, on that day, he actually winked at Cameron as he did it. Now, let's take the blame from where it lies. The funding for the BBC came from government. What's happened now, we've had a week or 2 weeks where the veterans of the country, quite rightly, were applauded for what they did for this nation and setting an example to everybody else to do the same. And at the same time, a day after, the pen was on the paper about taking the licences away from those same people. And across this district as we stand now, without any other age relation issues, we have 4,800 people who, as Steve says, apart from the issue of the credits, 4,800 now are going to be devoid of getting a licence next year. Now it's time you stood up and represented those people. It's time we shouted up and said, we're not going to have it and we're going to represent those views. It's not just the elderly, as our new councillor has said. We all know through our own constituents, we have people out there through health and frailty, and just not elderly alone, who depend on the television for company, for entertainment, and for values of news around the world that it brings to them. We must ensure that that keeps going. And to say that somebody who's on 50p over the wage limit will have to fork out £158 is disgraceful, and there's no other words for it. We're here to represent those people, and we will shout loud and clear. And while we're at it, can we add community centres all across the district to get these petitions in, because the community centres are the lifeblood of these older people as well. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Rhodes. If there's no other contributions on the reply to Councillor Box, we'll move on then to... Oh, sorry, Councillor Scott. You've got a minute.
On TV licences, we're starting now with the over 75s, but where will it stop? Because some people with disabilities get their licences half price, so that's the next stop. So if this goes through, where we're saying it's okay for people over 75 to have to pay for their licence, the next thing will be where people with disabilities have to pay for their full licence in full. So it's where will this stop?
Thank you, Councillor Scott. That's done with. We can move on to agenda item number 7, which is to receive written Cabinet members' reports in accordance with the Council Procedure Rule 14.1. Cabinet members have up to 5 minutes to present their report, and after that there'll be a further 15 minutes allocated to enable each Cabinet member to respond to any questions or brief comments on issues of their respective portfolios. The first report is from Councillor Mrs Jeffreys. Councillor Mrs Jeffreys, would you please introduce your report to Council?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. In moving my report, just a couple of things to say. Earlier this week, I took a paper to Cabinet about road landlords and how they were treating the people that we represent in this district. And I'll make no apologies for raising it again here, even though it's not quite in my report, because we need the publicity on this. What we need the public and these landlords to know is that we're not going to stand for any more bad behaviour. They're just buying up whole streets, particularly in some wards. They're buying up whole streets, they're putting people in there with no support, and the other people that have lived there all their lives are going through hell. It's just unbelievable what's happening, and we're bringing extra resources in, extra staff to deal with this, and we're going to tackle it. The other issue I want to raise is about the master plans for the towns. It's mentioned in here that we're going to do a master plan for Wakefield and for the 5 towns area. But we've got other towns. We've got Ossett, Horbury, South Emsall. They all need looking at as well. They're all fabulous towns in their own right. And we are spending money actually in South Emsall doing the market and moving that. I've been working with Lynn and Steve on that and Michelle, and we're moving forward with that. But we do need to reach out to Horbury and Ossett and the other areas and get the real moving things forward. We've got the summit on Monday afternoon, and we've applied for funding, but there will be fair shares for all across the district, make no doubt about that. That's what we're going to do. I was in Nottingley this morning, Tom, and met a number of people who actually put some of their views forward, and I'm looking forward to working with them to move things forward as well. So there's a lot that we're going to do with investment and regeneration, but we are making sure that everywhere gets its fair too. And I move my report.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffreys. Is there any questions or brief comments on Councillor Mrs Jeffreys' report? Councillor Lund.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you to the Strategic Housing team for their work in the Primrose Hill area, and that's ongoing, and the work they have done in College Grove. They brought on board the landlords who are becoming increasingly want to be involved in the work they're doing. They've increased the quality of the housing lived in by the tenants. Some of them are in bad state, some just needed a few repairs. It's been a good quality piece of work. It's a shame that we haven't got more resources that could be further rolled out, but a good thank you to the team.
Thank you, Councillor Lund. Councillor Womersley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Jeffreys, first of all, I'd like to start by saying I commend the schemes that you've started doing, but I think we're really, really good. However, what I've not seen is any mention that it's been applied in my ward. Secondly, what I'd like to talk about is I've seen that we've got master plans for 2004, this council commissioned a report, and it was identified where Edinburgh was probably the most deprived area in the district. And as a result, to the council's credit, the grant of 5.2 million were attained. And as a result, the west end area of Edinburgh was demolished by compulsory purchase and by agreement with residents. And to follow that on, the other streets surrounding were made really nice, walls, gates, etc., etc., etc. However, it was identified that these new houses needed to be put up and needed to do quickly. The former service director said in 2008 that they were trying to do the best they could for at least 2009, and the most important thing was affordable housing for first-time buyers with a ratio of 30%. However, this area lay fallow for at least 5-6 years, and in 2011, a grant, the regeneration grant, was given this council 8 million to be divided between 4 areas: Kinsley, Fitzwilliam, South Ensel, Hemsworth, and Thurston. Thurston got completed, South Ensel got completed, Fitzwilliam got completed, Hemsworth is starting now. In fact, I had an email yesterday that the contracts should be signed any sooner. The thing that concerns me is, if it was a 30% ratio then for affordable housing to assist first-time buyers onto the property ladder, the information from when I spoke to this council, there's going to be 2 affordable houses on that site. Which also leads me on.
Is this a question on the report, Councillor? Is it a question on the report?
Well, it's a question on the report. What I'm leaving from Mr. Mayor is I'm trying to establish a point of where the regeneration is going to my community.
Is it a question on the report?
It's a question.
Okay. Can you move to the question then, please?
Yes, sorry, Mr. Mayor. The question is, in my world at the moment, there's a lot of dissatisfaction, and obviously I want to put in detail and I respect what the minister is discussing. The question is that we are devoid of services, we are devoid of finances, as are other wards in this district. Today I'm going to highlight and give examples, but I think the best way for me to qualify this today is to ask you, will you have a meeting with me in the near future so that I can talk to you and put some ideas for my ward in relation to parks, cemeteries, and I think that's the best way to deal with today, because as I said, I don't really, drag on this speech very time.
Thank you, Councillor Womersley. That's very good of you. Councillor Jeffrey, do you want to respond?
Yeah, thanks for that, Ian. I didn't mention Hemsworth and I should have done. I know you'd stand up and say that, but we will have a meeting with members and we'll try and move things forward. I think it's best if we sit down and do it together.
Fantastic. And if you look at slide is to try and put them out to happen.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It was a great pleasure to welcome the Mayor of Nanning to our city last month for the official signing of a friendship agreement between Wakefield and Nanning, which has the potential to open the new doors for partnership in education, economics, and also business, and to bring in the new opportunity, the stream of investment to Wakefield. So it was also a valuable moment of cross-party agreement, I would say, and I'd like to thank Councillor Jeffrey and the team as well, taking this opportunity, this important conversation very seriously, and also with after I raised it and all the work that the team has done up to now. And now we are delighted to say that the leader and the deputy leader has already committed to actually pay the return visit to the Nanning to see whether there is further opportunity to be explored. So I just want to ask a question. Do you think this is a very, very good opportunity for us to go out to visit China but minimize the public spending from the council's purse? Thank you.
Councillor Jeffrey.
Yes, I think it's a good idea to visit, but we must make sure that we get the benefits. If we're spending public money on visits, then we must make sure that we get the benefit from business. So we shall be going out, and you've congratulated my team, and Claire's sitting there now. We will be talking to business, to see if they are interested in coming along with us and using their own money. We cannot pay for business people to get business in China. So we will be looking at it in a proper manner. But when we're talking about public money, it has to be done in the right way and we have to get the benefits from it. But we were pleased to receive the invitation.
Councillor Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, I'm going to raise an extremely sensitive issue. I've had to write this down. And it's one that gives me no pleasure at all in saying, but it is one that everyone who lives and shops in Wakefield can see with their own eyes every single day. And it is becoming a growing concern which could well affect our economic growth and regeneration. Over the past few months, Wakefield has seen a large increase in the number of street beggars on our streets. And I am not talking about genuine people who are suffering and who always deserve our support. I am talking about people who lie to the public all day and go home of an evening with their pockets full of money. For example, I saw a woman playing the role of homeless the other day, and I know she isn't because I know where she lives. Now, the other day, I was in our Zetland Street
Councillor
office.
Cruz, can I say, it says questions or brief comments, not a statement. Have you got a question for Councillor Jeffrey or a brief comment?
Yes, I have. How are we going to tackle this, please, Denise? I was approached the other day by a man in the office, and he was genuinely homeless. I listened to his story. I know. Which bracket do you put it under? It comes under a lot. And he said to me, you're a councillor, you have to do something about this because it's not fair on us. And that's all I've got to say because I've been cut short. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Sorry, it says questions or brief comments, not a statement. Thank you. Councillor Jeffries.
Yeah, I know that you feel passionate about this because we have discussed it, and I think we all do. It is very difficult to tackle it. We're working with the police, we're working with the Business Improvement District, but I know the person that you're speaking about, and I have mentioned it myself, and it is absolutely appalling that businesses are having to put up with this. There are genuine people, but there are places that people can go. We have the no second night out policy. There's no need for it at all. But some of them are just booking the system and they have Range Rovers and they're going home with money in the pocket, as you say. So, I know it is. I know. It's not an easy thing to tackle, and we are working with all agencies to do it, and we are bringing disbursement orders in. But we need people to enforce it, and that's the problem. We haven't got the police to enforce it, but it is something that I do think about on a regular basis.
Thank you. Councillor Gordon.
Yeah, it was just on the report. One of the things that I noticed under the sections was for the master plans, it kept mentioning appointing outside consultants or putting out tenders for them. I'm not a master on regeneration, and I can't say it's something that I know too much about, but I was just wondering if you could explain, like, in terms of with those tenders and inviting in those consultants, is this something that we could potentially do in-house? Because my experience with specialist services like that, if you keep using them outside, then it's probably going to cost more. Like I say, it was just sort of a genuine query about how we ensure that we're getting value for money from a local sort of taxpayer point of view.
The problem, Councillor Gordon, is that we haven't got the staff to deal with it. We just, because of all the austerity and, you know, I know the Liberals worked with the Conservatives in a coalition. I had to get that one in. But we just haven't got the staff to deal with that. But I do think that we need to, you need to sit down very quickly now with officers and look at the master plan and get yourself up to speed with what's going on in. I know I'm not being patronising. You do need to be briefed on the scheme and what we're doing, and then you'll find out about the consultants. But there is a lot going on in Nottingham, and I think that we need to brief you properly on it, and then we'll explain. It's not for perhaps in here, but I will speak to you.
Are there any further questions or brief comments to Councillor Jeffries' report? If not, thank you, Councillor Jeffries. Thank you. Moving on, the next portfolio order is for adults and health. Councillor Mrs Heptinstall, would you please introduce your report to Council?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. In moving my report, I would like to highlight the free digital resource for carers developed by Carers UK. This offers valuable up-to-date information on the internet to help and support carers. As my report says, there are thousands of carers across the district, and it is important that they all get the support and the care that they need. And with that, I will move my report, Mr Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Heptinstall. Are there any questions or brief comments on the report? If not, thank you, Councillor Heptinstall, for that. The next report is from the portfolio holder for children and young people. Councillor Mrs Isherwood, would you please introduce your report to Council?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, I will introduce my report. First of all, I'd like to welcome Tyler and Jack from the UK Parliament, Youth Parliament. Got an interest in it. I've visited the Youth Parliament a number of times, and it's good to see them here. I was going to do a lot about the good stuff that's in this report today, particularly the Build Our Futures Children and Young People Summit. But unfortunately, I'm going to have to address the issues raised by Councillor Ahmed about the Children's Services Ofsted report. The inspectors made it clear that we absolutely know what needs to be done, and they agreed that it will take time to fully implement the changes, judging the scale of improvement that is needed. Councillor Ahmed will be aware that when anybody goes into intervention, as we did do last November, it takes 2.5 to 3 years to come out of that intervention. We've got a long way to go, and we're well aware of that. But I find it really, really sad that we're using a monitoring visit, one monitoring visit on MASH to undermine all the work that our officers have been doing and our workforce are doing. They've already been pummeled by Ofsted, they've been pummeled by the SEND, which is another report that's coming out, and to find people within this chamber feeling the fair game to attack in order to make political points against the leader of this council, I find that absolutely disgraceful. I care about our children's services, and we will do everything we need to do to make sure that we have the best children's services in this country. Yes, there were some negatives and there were some positives, but we are confident, as the leader said, that we are moving at a sustainable pace. There's no point rushing to try to make sure that we get to good if we then end up yo-yoing in and out of intervention because the stability is not there. You need to understand that. I understand it. Colleagues understand it. Officers understand it. Without the firm foundations, we will not sustain the good improvements that we make. I'll go to the point that Councillor Ahmed made. And I have got the report and I've read it a number of times. Planned actions are too slow. It does say that in the report, but it also says planned actions are too slow in some, not all, just some critical areas of social work. We're aware of that. We have people working on it. It's identified, and we are doing the work to address that problem. Ofsted findings also show progress in some key areas. They confirm that significant activity has strengthened our front door and initial response to help and protect children and young people, as well as supporting social work practice. Another important part of that report was that morale of our staff is improving. They're confident, and
when we think how they work, I've worked with these staff, I've spoken to them, I've spoken to the unions, and the morale was at bottom pitch. They're now lifting up. But you don't mention that. You don't mention these positive things that have come out of this report. And to me, you should be ashamed of yourself, because as far as I'm concerned, you're using this report just to score political points against the leader of this council, and you're a disgrace.
Thank you, Mrs Isherwood, for your report. Are there any questions or brief comments on the report? Councillor Arben.
I think there's only one disgrace here, and that's you. So let's just get that clear. So obviously, if you want to speak in that language there, you've all spoken. If you want to speak in that language, then that language will be met back. The terms of respect, maybe you need to understand that yourself first. The monitoring visit, I'll go through it now, because obviously you didn't understand it when you read it, and clearly you didn't read or understand what I said on there. So you wait for the question, because if you read the rules and procedures, like some people want to point out the rules and procedures, it allows comments on there. So unless you're going to change the constitutional change on there and suggest the minuting of that, then it suggests that we allow people to ask the questions.
It says brief comments.
The monitoring inspection, maybe you don't understand what that is showing a lack of progress on the areas. And in fact, nowhere in this council or any of the minutes has anybody in the Conservative group or myself ever criticised social workers or any of the staffing within the council. The criticism has been you, Councillor Rowley and Councillor Box. And that's what you need to do, is come sometimes, just take responsibility for your own actions in there. It also acknowledges there has been, if you look in the council chamber today and listen, there has been some positives within the report. And I think that's what we need to do, is actually recognise when it says feelings of serious cases, when it says the response to requests for help and protection in the hours is not always robust. Not all children who have been identified of risk of significant harm have had timely strategy discussions, etc. So that is something that the opposition should bring up to the council to ask you, what is the plan, and can you identify the key area within the action plan which tells me that that specific action has been addressed or has been highlighted, and what's the progress to that so far? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Isherwood.
Yeah, I'll respond to that. Yes, we do know what the failings are. We're working on it. We have plans. We discussed these prior to this meeting when we had the improvement board update. If you'd been here, you would have heard where we are. You would have been able to ask the questions of the you would have been able to ask the questions of Beata Wagner, the ones you're alluding to there. But you do not attend anything. You do not attend the improvement board. You do not attend the briefings. You do not attend the updates. Yet you come in here and you start criticising and asking questions or making statements when you could find all this out. And don't forget, Councillor Ahmed, I remember when this first came up, I made an appointment to see you. I said, let's meet up and let's discuss how we can work together to actually support children's services and improve them. You never turned up. You didn't even apologise for not turning still in my diary.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Isherwood and Councillor Ahmed. We're on to Councillor Farmer now.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Agenda page 41. I'd firstly like to thank Beata, Oliver Budd and Sarah Vines. I spent a long afternoon it was with Sarah, with the social workers, the real people that sort out the real problems. To say it was a fascinating day would be probably an understatement. But there were two cases I went to, obviously we can't talk about the cases, but I thought it described it as tragic. And all I can recommend is that if anybody's got enough time, just spend half a day, if you spend a day with them, then you'll realise what the frontline staff really are doing. Because they're a credit to this council, all the arguments about leadership, that goes on. The real people are a credit to this council. And it was humbling to have spent a long afternoon it wasn't, If I was a social worker, I'd spend the majority of my time in the pub. I really would be. And it's a traumatic afternoon, I think. Absolutely traumatic it was. And to experience that, I've experienced a lot of things in my life, but to experience those two cases was nothing short, I would consider tragic. So I understand all the hassle they get. The frontline staff are the main support people in children's services, and they are an absolute credit to themselves, the council, to Beatty, to the managers. What goes on above that, I don't know. But it was fantastic to see what they really do on the front line. It was absolutely awesome. And to me, they're a credit, absolute credit. And thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for those observations, Councillor Farmer. Councillor Lothram.
Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor. I just want to make a brief comment on the improvement journey. I'm speaking as a former social worker, a former team manager of foster care, and now a counsellor, and involved in scrutiny. To get sustainable, deep-rooted improvement, it's very hard. It's extremely hard to achieve that in social care, particularly when we've got 14 million people living in poverty. I just wish to draw your attention to the welcomed news regarding the 138% increase in inquiries in foster care recruitment, especially given the numbers of foster carers who are retiring. This is so we can keep a stable position, which is absolutely crucial to any social work activity. As I say, I used to be a foster carer manager. This represents real hard but successful work and improvement. And I also would like to congratulate Margaret and Beata and others involved on this very difficult work. And I can also say, I'm just going to finish now, that as a former social worker and still a registered social worker, actually, the terms of your registration cover not only social workers, it covers managers, it covers people who are dealing with social care in many different aspects. So it's for everybody to be congratulated. Thank you.
Thank you for those observations. Margaret, do you want to reply?
Yes, first of all, Councillor Farmer, I'm pleased you're going on the visits, and I know that, and I would encourage everybody else to go on them, because they do really let you see what the work is involved. I've had some inquiries today from people who want to visit the Educare team and the Out of Hours team. These are things that were highlighted in the Ofsted report, and it's a way for members to find out where the problem is and perhaps fetch them back in to the council so that we can actually tackle them. If you keep on going, you'll be more well known than me eventually. With the foster care, I have to congratulate the foster care team. They've put in an awful lot of work to try to increase the number of foster carers, and it is important that we do have more foster carers to look after our young people. Thank you.
Councillor Tennant-King.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's just a comment that I want to make on the Councillor Sherwood's report. It's nice to see that the youth work team were presented with the Outstanding Service to the Community Award. I actually accidentally bumped into them one night in Featherstone while they were carrying out some of the work, and the kids were really engaged. There were a lot of noise, lots of activity going on, and it's just nice to see. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tennant-King. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am the one actually attend the improvement journey this afternoon, and I'd like to extend my thanks to Beata and the team for the work they have done so far. But one thing I do want to remind the councillors, colleagues across this chamber, that Councillor Ahmed is a professional. His professional integrity told him how to interpret this report. And I want to ask Councillor Ishwood, on what capacity you don't agree, you don't understand his interpretation of this report? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sherwood.
Well, as a professional, Councillor Ahmed should be aware that this isn't a short journey we're on. His reflections seem to intimate that he thinks we should be up there at good now. We're not up there at good now. And I know that. The people who are doing all the hard work know that. And this is what I'm trying to get across to people. It's a long journey, and we're just at the beginning of it. And for criticism like that to come across isn't helpful.
Thank you. Any other members wishing to give any questions? Councillor Stansby.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Margaret, you know I've worked with you over the last year to try and improve children's services. You know how important it is, both on a personal level and because I care about the children in Wakefield. And I was really disappointed when you said that you care about children's services. I would have much preferred it if you'd have said that you cared about the children in Wakefield. But my point is, and my question is, that, bear with, that despite, I couldn't make today's meeting because I had children in from my ward, but otherwise I have attended almost every single meeting. And I've asked the questions and I've still not got the answers. And it's regarding the front door. We know it's failing. It's been failing for a long time. And I've asked at audit meetings, I've asked at corporate parenting, I've asked at the improvement meetings. We know that the software is not fit for purpose, and that is part of the issue. And I think it's really unfair that social workers are almost getting the blame for something that isn't their fault. And when can we get an answer with regard to the software, please? Because this is costing, or could cost children's lives. Thank you.
Councillor Isherwood.
Yes, the Cabinet report on the 11th of June authorised the instigation of an investigation into getting a new system in. That has now started. The specification has gone out for people to come in and tender, because we do realise that one of the problems that social workers are facing is the actual software of the data collection equipment. So it is moving onwards now, and we are now just we've got the model there that we want, and we're going to invite tenders. They should be coming in shortly, and then it's a matter of fetching the new system in.
Councillor Binns.
Focus slightly. I attended the Building Futures Day on the 11th of May. I found it really inspiring. The young children were absolutely brilliant. They did lots of things. The speaker was phenomenal. He was absolutely brilliant. But I do have to say it was very chaotic and it wasn't very well organised. So I hope that the next one will be a bit more organised.
Thank you, Councillor Binns. You want to reply?
Yes, thank you. I thought it was a wonderful day, and I think when you get with young people, everything's chaotic, especially when you get 100 and odd young people running about, because they were all really excited. It was a brilliant day.
All done on this? Yep. Councillor Isherwood, thank you for your report. Moving on to the next portfolio order, which is for corporate services, and that's Councillor Shaw. Would you move your report to Council, please?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just looking on page 22, I wanted to draw people's attention to the Here to Health campaign. Certainly in our area, we've got a number of people who need support because they're in poverty. I think we all know that. Sometimes they come along to counsellors in their surgeries, but by the time they come along and talk to us, they're already in trouble. And the council does help, and certainly if you look at the paragraph that says every year thousands of people contact Wakefield, certainly in the housing sector, 2,300 people were out last year. It's so important that we get the message out there, and so what certainly we're asking people inside this chamber, and they'll certainly be putting it out in our community, to look out for the campaign and to share it and spread the word that there is help out there. Certainly with the economic thing, because for people who are starting to get into problems, to have early intervention, to be able to talk to somebody and get financial advice is really important. Obviously, the other point that I'd like to raise about apprenticeships. This is our future within Wakefield. I think the leader said, and we've talked about this in the past, about keeping talent within the area. A lot of talent does get trained up and then moves out. By getting apprenticeships, it starts to secure and keep still within the area. And I'm really pleased that the work that the officers are doing and see the numbers now, there's over 264 people within the council, but they're not just what we call some of the basic apprenticeships, they're looking at some advanced apprenticeships as well, and that's got to be talent for the businesses that are in Wakefield and to tap into it future years. So certainly with that, the last thing I'd like to say is, for those of you who know, Liz Ogden is certainly in the legal area, and Liz started work within Wakefield, funnily enough, as a youngster coming through the system. She's been here 33 years now and she's finishing. I think she's finishing within the next week or so. And I've worked with Liz for a while, and I'd just like to thank her for all the service and certainly all the good sense. Because as we all know, certainly in the legal side, we can all sit down with lawyers and get some funny results on that side of it. Liz has always been down to earth and very pragmatic about some of her views. So certainly, Murray, if you'll take that back, certainly from me and I'm sure from the Chamber, we wish her all the well in her future. With that, I'll move my report.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. Are there any brief comments or questions on the report? Councillor Stansby.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Yeah, just wanted to say, Les, absolutely behind you on the apprenticeships. Both, yeah, my daughter's been on one and it's led to a fantastic career. I think we should have parity with degrees. I've been asking as many people, businesses I know, to support this. So I've got a nice row of businesses lined up for apprentices to go into. But yeah, well done.
Councillor Alan Garber.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. I just want to thank Les for the work that's been done on apprenticeships. I former apprenticeship myself, and I know there's many in the Chamber, and it's very good reading and support what you're doing, Les, and I hope it continues.
Les, do you want to come back?
I think it's really important that you said that, because
I started out as an apprentice, 15-year-old, and went to work and developed, and the company that I was at actually trained me up like we're training these up. I think it's so important for these, of all genders, to know that they can actually deliver and actually do well going forward. So I fully endorse what everybody's saying, and we'll keep doing it, and we'll keep increasing the numbers.
Councillor Wassell.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think I might have needed to declare an interest in the apprenticeship issue. My son is now 46, and 30 years ago he was an apprentice with this authority. So it's not a new thing, isn't the apprenticeships that this authority are doing. It's a continuing project, and we've moved many, many people forward via the apprenticeship schemes that have been supported by this council. And if other businesses locally would accept additional apprentices, we could help a lot more people with their futures. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Wassell. Councillor Graham-Isherwood.
yeah, I mean, as a former apprentice, I was an apprentice of the year, me, by the way. I'm not like you. I was a proper apprentice with a proper apprentice training. And that's what I'd like to say, and that's why I'm so proud of the council. Is obviously, we don't do as many as we used to do in the good old days when we used to see them pilot through and what have you. But apprenticeships nowadays seems to be a word that's just bandied about. Some of them are called apprentices because they get a 2-year contract, putting tin cans on shelves and what have you. And what I'm proud about with our authority is that they are quality apprenticeships. And when you're finished, you're set up for life. As you can see, I'm set up for life now because I was a great apprentice. But I do welcome it, and I just hope that we can. I know WDH, they're doing similar stuff, college, exams, learning how to do the job properly. And I commend this council, and long may it continue, and let's hope we can expand it in future years. You never know, do you? Thank you.
Les, you all right with that? Okay. Any other comments on Councillor Shaw's report? If not, thank you, Councillor Shaw, for that. Moving on, the portfolio holder for culture, leisure and sport, Councillor Spate, would you please introduce your report to Council?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Box has already mentioned that Councillor Lynn Masterman has been appointed to the role of Heritage Champion for the Council. Lynn will join a network of champions right across the country, which was established by Historic England, and we're really delighted that she's taken this role. Her work will cut across services, and she will ensure that the focus and profile of our heritage assets remains high, and that local residents and visitors can continue to benefit from them. So I really wish her well in that. Just a couple of other tiny little things that I want to mention. We were delighted to have commissioned at the end of last month our 5th Tober Taffel, this one in Wakefield 1 Library, and that is thanks to Wakefield North members who paid for it from their local capital grant, and it's very kind, so thank you all for that. And also to remind you that not only do we have the Armed Forces Day coming up in July, but on the 7th of July, on the Sunday, it's Pontefract Licorice Festival, so I urge you all to go along. And in fact, if you're attending the day earlier to the Armed Forces, when you've done there, you can also bob along to Pontefract Castle and join in the picnics that are happening up there. So thank you very much.
Are there any questions or brief comments on Councillor Mrs Spate's report? Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Councillor Slate. Just to say, I'd like to add on to what's in your report. I attended with yourself at Airedale Library an event for the volunteers of the libraries. It was a fantastic event for all volunteers across Wakefield District from the libraries, and there were awards given to the people that had done the majority of work for the libraries, and boxes of chocolates and boxes of biscuits were given out. It was a really, really good event, showing how appreciative the library services are to the volunteers.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. Councillor Farmer.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. As a fellow ward councillor, I'm sure Angela and myself would like to congratulate Lynn on being the heritage champion. Not sure exactly what that is, but I'm sure we'll find out. And me being cynical, I presume that you already started your campaign for next year. So if you'd like a bit of advice on how to win it, ask Angela or myself. I'll give you a bit of advice. If you're going to campaign without Peter. Thank you.
Change parties.
Peter, I can win with any party, Peter.
You lost that one.
Councillor Gordon.
Hi, yeah, it was just a question about the Pontefract Leisure Centre that I think ground's been broken on today or this week, or I saw a press release. I know originally it was meant to have been in March according to a previous press release, and I think that, correct me if I'm wrong on the stats and the numbers, I think originally it was billed at around 14 million and that's now gone up to 20 million and some. I was just wondering in terms of, like, that's nearly a 40% increase obviously, and one of the things that's sort of quite striking is particularly people in Nottingley, seeing that the cost of that rise by 6 million, we could have actually had our own leisure centre like in Minsford, that only cost 5.5 million. With that increase that's gone up, we're feeling a little bit peeved, to be quite honest. And I was just wondering what reasonings there was in the delay and also the increase in cost, and if you had some more information on that, really. Thank you.
Councillor Spade.
First of all, can I just respond to Councillor Scott and say, yeah, I went to the Friends event and it was absolutely terrific to be there. The number of people that are involved in our libraries, we really couldn't manage without them, and they do an absolutely terrific job for us, so thanks to them all. Yeah, turning to the Five Towns Leisure. I think there may have been a little delay. I think it was in terms of planning. We had a bit of delay on planning. Yes, and the cost did go up. One of the reasons for that was we encountered a drainage issues across the site that even the Water Authority didn't know was there, and I think that was about 500,000 in terms of dealing with that. The other thing is we've got in applications for extra funding from
the Sports Foundation, and sorry, I'm somewhere else, and we got those applications in, but we had to demonstrate that we were prepared to put that money in, and that came to about 2 million, but we actually have got those funds that we've actually had grants from two organisations, and we're actually still following up trying to on a third. So there's about 2.5 million there that is accounted for that, if you like, an increase. So that's as much as I can give you. But I will, if you want me to find out any more detail of that, I will come back to you on more precise figures. But the good news is that, you know, we have got extra funding in, which means that we won't have to pay out as much as we originally intended.
Councillor Tennant-King.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Jackie, it's about the Tover Taffel table. That's a bit of a mouthful, isn't it? I went round to Wakefield 1 on Monday, and the lovely lady Carol at reception there, she showed me the table because it was brought to my attention by Councillor Graham Isherwood, because we have a group in Featherstone who come from Chesneys and have got learning disabilities, and I think that's something that they would get a lot out of. And we also have like a memory group as well, and so we decided through us capital grants funding that we would like to purchase one for Featherstone Library, and that's what we're going to do. Thank you.
Councillor Alan Garbutt.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It's a bit of a plug really, because all the features that's which are brilliant, but there's a great attraction on the 29th of June at Ackworth, which is Ackworth Gala.
Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd just like to say thank you to Councillor Spate for the efforts made with Sandal Castle. I know it's not as interesting in many ways as Pontefract Castle, certainly not as complete, but it is a good historic site and very much loved by people who live around there. Both my children had a riotous time on it, in it and around it. I'm just very pleased you're continuing to look after it. Thank you.
Councillor Spate.
Yeah, it was great that we finished the first stages of work, and we're now moving on to some of the conservation of the walls, etc. But I was delighted that, again, we're talking about our Friends groups and what a terrific job they do. But the Friends of Sandal Castle held an event there recently, which was an absolutely terrific day. From everything they've sent me about it, it was an absolutely super day with lots and lots of people enjoying themselves. And again, it was just demonstrating how much our Friends groups can help in communities and helping communities to enjoy their assets and amenities.
Councillor Jones.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I think obviously on the basis of the Tour de Yorkshire, Pontefract, I think, got a bit of an award, which was the best dressed town. And so I'd obviously like to thank Phil Cook, who led on this with the Pontefract Civic Society and Paul Cartwright, because they put in a huge amount of work, particularly on when there was a certain bit of damage was done the night before. They were out very early on the morning of Friday to actually make the repairs done. They did a fantastic job. The town was great. And when you actually looked at the aerial shots in the evening of how good the town looked and how good the castle looked and the artwork that was done, it was all done obviously with the support of the council side. But likewise, it was the work of volunteers in Pontefract who did a cracking job to protect the town. And I think it is nice as well, being a former history teacher and having taught in Wakefield and taught in Pontefract, having used both castles in my years of being a history teacher, it is great because obviously I think we are the only district council in the country that's got two castles. Nobody else has got two castles. And so it does take on a significant amount of responsibility running them. But they are both historical classrooms, I think, for the work of a lot of young people in the area. And it's great the amount of work that's now being done in order to ensure that they are a brilliant sort of classroom for the teaching of history in what is a very rich area of history. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Spade.
Yeah, I add my congratulations to the Civic Society and the other organisations involved in the dressing of Pontefract for the Tour de Yorkshire. I think they were very well deserved winners, and I did email the chair of the Civic Society to congratulate them.
Are there any other questions or brief comments to Councillor Mrs Spate on her report? Yes, we've got Councillor Scott.
Thank you. Just a couple of things. The Tour de Yorkshire, I'm sure across the district there are a lot of events put on by volunteer groups. We had one in Airedale with Airedale Neighbourhood Management putting on an event for the day with races. Street Scene came, put some lines down for kids to be able to race on, cleaned the area up before and afterwards, so thanks to that, Maureen. And they were really good. And then the Toma Tackle table, I'm glad other libraries are getting these, because we've got one in Airedale that we paid for out of our capital grant, and we have children coming with disabilities, and we also have adults coming with learning difficulties. So it's an absolute asset to any library in the district.
Any other comments? Councillor Wassell?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I attended Pontefract Castle Medieval Day. At the same time, I attended Castleford Roman Festival. I attended the Queen's Mill Open Day, and I even managed to get into Castleford Library and see the chariot burial that's on display that was found in the Airedale area of Castleford as well. I had a very, very full day that day with so many events happening in the locality. It was awesome. I went with young people as well as older people like myself, and we all enjoyed the entire day. The cannons at Pontefract Castle scared me out of my skin, and the kids never even flinched, but the muskets were good. Sadly, I understand someone had one stolen, but there's always a downside to the story. But other than that, the guides at the castle were brilliant, taking people into the vaults, and it's a bit cold down there, but it was a good enough day, and overall it went off very well. At Castleford, Pontefract, both events were brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you. Underlining the history and heritage has been said of our district. Any other questions? Councillor Stansby.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Jackie, I can't believe nobody has raised this. Honestly, your report is wonderful. Everything is wonderful in here. But what?
Is that outside?
Is that outside? Honestly, I got to work and there was a thing come through and they just said to me, how, why, what? And I couldn't tell them. Now, I must admit, I'm not into that, but please, please, what is it?
The controlling group had a whip round to me.
Councillor Spate.
Thank you, Councillor Stansby. I'm so glad you've raised that, because I thought that was going to be, everyone raising that with me. And I've already had conversations with some of my fellow members who, like you, are not quite sure about it. But art is a funny thing. It's meant to provoke. It's meant to be controversial, and it's certainly doing that. And because of that, that means that art is being talked about. So it's not just about giving pleasure, it's about challenging our thinking, and it's about inspiring creativity. And we had some college students, the college students next door went to the workshops where that was made, and they had a brilliant time. They were art students, and then they were there when it was opened earlier this week. And the principal told me that they'd found it absolutely inspiring. So it might not suit us all, but that's where we are. But it is part of the Yorkshire Sculpture International, which is a 100-day festival that starts on Friday. And it's absolutely tremendous because we're the first, Leeds and Wakefield, the first councils in the UK to host this festival. So we're very, very lucky that we've got the Hepworth and the Yorkshire Sculpture Park. And nearby we've got the other two institutions in Leeds. I won't mention them, but they're great as well. And so there's going to be about 18 different exhibitions around over the 100 days. So I think we're going to get a lot out of it, from both in terms of enjoyment, but also to our local economy. Yeah, we will. Lots of people love it. It's nice. It's nice, Little honestly.
Yeah. Are there any other comments on Councillor Spate's report? Councillor Graham Isherwood. Thank you, Councillor Isherwood. Any other comments to make? No? Thank you, Councillor Spate, for your report. I'm going to move on to the next, who is the portfolio holder for Communities and Environment. Councillor Mrs Cummins, will you introduce your report to Council?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Well, at least one question that I had been answered. Now I know what the statue actually resembles. So thank you, Peter. Just raise a couple of issues. Agenda page 26, I just want to commend Airedale Academy on the work that they do around the drama that they do in school, about raising issues around not just domestic abuse, but child sexual exploitation. And this Friday I'm going to a performance of the Drama Society there for their Angels with Knives, which is a big thing that's in the news at the moment about young people carrying knives. I want to draw people's attention to the fact, please don't throw batteries anymore in your waste bins. Take them to one of the many recycling battery centres that we've now established across the district. And I just want to cover something that Councillor Cruz actually said earlier, and I totally agree with you about aggressive begging. It is something that the CSP, the Community Safety Partnership, is actually looking at the moment. We are developing an on-street, one of these phone app things, so that people that come across it can actually report it straight away without actually getting involved. But we do have aggressive beggars, and I too know the one that you refer to. And whilst ever people will give them money, whether it's aggressively or unaggressively, it's about the education. We need to say to people, don't give money to people who are begging. You know, give them your time, give them information if they require it, but please don't give them money, because it will bring them back. But we are, and I'm happy to share that piece of work with you. I got your passion behind that, and I totally agree with you. So that was just something that you raised I wanted to answer the question about. And with that, Mr Mayor, I will move my report.
Thank you, Councillor Cummins. When you do go to Airedale, will you pass on my absolute praise for them? Because one of the things I attended, didn't say in the start of my report, was when they had the Ghanaian teachers across there who presented me with the scarf as well, so I'll wear that next time out. But the entertainment that they put on there was absolutely first class. Will you pass on my thanks and appreciation? Councillor Shaw with the question or brief comment.
It's a brief comment, but I must say this. I've been involved on and off over the years at Airedale Academy, and I've got to say, people talk about children in places like Airedale and that in their own context, to be honest. There's a lot of really talented kids who care, and they cared about the issue, because what you pointed out, Maureen, and really thanks for putting this in your report, they've done alcohol, they're doing knives, they've done domestic violence of these kids, because they see it every day when they're growing up. But they're in there and they put it out there on a stage, and it's packed. There's lots of people going into there and see it. So thank you for highlighting that, Maureen, because I think we should highlight more of what the good the kids do in this area, not all about the troubles.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. Can I also give a mention to Airedale that they'll be coming along as part of my Mayor Says Thanks. We're having a Mayor's afternoon tea party to present some of the awards, and Airedale Academy will be performing at that, and I thank them very much, because they're going to set the standard very high. I'm going to ask Councillor Gordon, please.
I'm sorry if I keep asking too many questions. It was just, I've got two sort of for you here, if you wouldn't mind. It was just in the report under the enforcement page. It talks about environmental crime and CCTV. The report doesn't seem to have any dates to say in what period that was, and it also doesn't say how that compares with previous sort of time periods. I was wondering if that was something you could maybe, if you know them, if you could let us know now or get in touch and let us know. The other thing was, well, I'm not sure if it falls into your portfolio. I spoke to the chief exec to try and check on this, and she wasn't too sure either, so don't blame me if it's not. It was just in regards to sort of Wakefield and what it does for LGBT people, and celebrating June is obviously Pride Month internationally, and it's now 50 years since the Stonewall riots that started off the liberation movement in the US and went on to be a worldwide sort of thing. Since 2014, homophobic hate crime has doubled, and there's been high-profile instances in London recently too, in the UK. And I was just wondering, what does the council do in terms of making sure that as communities we come together and celebrate diversity? And if there were any events planned over the summer, I know Wakefield Pride's a little bit later, it's in August. But that was, yeah, those sort of two things. Thank you.
Councillor Cummins.
And thank you for raising that. Yeah, I'll take the last point first. Yes, we do have a cohesion team, and I'm more than happy for you to go along and meet them, and they can tell you about the good work that they do across the district, and particularly around, we had a hate crime event yesterday in the ridings, which you probably weren't aware of, but we need to make everyone aware when we are actually doing something. But we do celebrate the key dates throughout the year, and we do celebrate through Hate Crime Week, which is later this year. And hate crime takes all sorts of forms. It's not necessarily homophobic, it's disability hate crime, and the many other forms that it comes in. I'm more than happy to arrange for you to meet with the cohesion team, Rachel Palin. She's absolutely fantastic, and I'm sure that she would answer all the questions that I probably can't answer in the time that we have here today. The CCTV, I always put those in. They actually relate. It's June, so it will have been. Those incidents will have been last month, May time. Comparably, I mean, it's different every time. I do report on them every council meeting, so there will be there every council meeting for you to compare. But you are, as an elected member, now able to visit the CCTV centre, which may be a good thing to actually do, to see how it works and see how they work with it and interact with the police and interact with the WABAC, the shop users, and so on and so forth, and the nighttime marshals and the PCSOs. So that might be a good visit that you might want to take up. They're always very welcoming, and you get a cup of tea and a biscuit.
And the LGBT things, is there anything going off? You got that? Okay, thank you. Councillor Keir.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to draw your attention to agenda page 28 and 29, CCTV again. It's fantastic to hear all the positive outcomes from live and monitored CCTV in the communities around the district. No one can deny that operatives of monitored CCTV systems are an invaluable tool to crime prevention. In November, I started a petition to ask Wakefield Council to install live monitored CCTV in Ward 2. It's that antisocial behaviour hotspot. 2,067 people signed that petition within a week. That equates to 16.7 of Ward 2 voters. Considering the turnout of the 2019 local elections of Ward 2, it was 22.4%. 16.7% is a significant percent of the electorate let down by Labour councillors. The petition was taken to the November's PAC meeting, and can you guess what the response from the Labour councillors was?
Is this going to
There
lead
is
to
a
a question?
yeah. But you would guess it, that there's no money. Okay. I think it's time for the council to reconsider and take action and install live and monitored CCTV in Airedale hotspots. You might say, who's paying for this? Well, already residents of Ward 2 are, and I'll bring you to the bottom of page 29. The man, who is a prolific and violent shoplifter, has terrorised shop staff in Airedale for years. Yes, terrorised for years. So with that, I would like to ask whether Wakefield Council will reconsider installing live and monitored CCTV in Ward 2. Thank you.
Councillor Cummins.
Thank you. I know Airedale has its problems. I don't necessarily feel it's a hot spot, but I do understand what you're referring to. Lots of members in this room have used some of their capital funding to do exactly what you're asking the council to do. Budgets are budgets. Things will suffer and things, you know, do go by the way. But sometimes we have to be innovative and maybe use our funding that we do get to help our communities. And I'm sure that if you talk to your ward colleagues and come up with a scheme, then it's something I'm sure that we would be able to support. But at this moment in time, CCTV in Airedale is not high on the agenda. Thank you.
I'm going to come to Councillor Shaw in a moment for another one, if I've got time, but I'm taking Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Maureen, we've not covered in this report, we've not covered fly tipping this time, and I know it's not because it's disappeared, and there's plenty of fly tipping in Ossett. And I don't condone any of it, but trying to get rid of waste in Wakefield is so difficult. The council closed all these small recycling sites like we had in Ossett, and we all were told we've got to go to the Denbydale one. And all right, I've brought this up before and you said to me, I'm sure you had such a bad experience, but I'm not the only one that's had a bad experience. Going to the Denbydale site, particularly at weekends, is horrific. Once eventually you get through the gates, you can't look at your watch and say, I haven't time to do this, because you're in a queue which goes slowly round, you get stuck. The very first time I went there, I was in this kind of situation, and I spoke to one of the managers there, and I said, this place isn't fit for purpose. And the manager himself said, you're right, it's not. You cannot, it just doesn't work the way, that's why there's a queue half a mile long out in the road, and getting in there, when you want to tip stuff, they say, well, go and park down there, and then you have to walk another 50 yards back to tip it. It does not work. And not only that, the times that it's open, I brought this up last time as well, because in actual fact, the difference between winter and summer opening, the only difference is you've got 3 hours extra on a Friday tea time. Both winter and summer on a Saturday and a Sunday, when everybody's doing the gardens and everybody's doing the DIY, it closes at 4 o'clock, both winter and summer. Now, I'm sorry, that is absolutely ridiculous. That's when it should be open till 8 o'clock at night. The other days, it's only open till 5 o'clock. Saturday and Sunday, it's open till 4 o'clock. Bank holidays, it's open till 5 o'clock. Wow, we get an extra day on a bank holiday. But it's ridiculous when we try, and then we wonder, like I say, I don't condone any fly tipping, but we wonder why it happens, because we can't get rid of our rubbish.
Thank you. Councillor Cummins.
Yes, you have brought this up before, and yes, it's open. It's open when it's open. It's the times are determined by the people that actually run it, which, as you know, is Renew. I've never experienced, I have to say, and I'm not saying it because you're offering the alternative argument, but I've never experienced that. I mean, maybe I can go, you know, during the day, etc., and you're only able to go on a Saturday and a Sunday. But when I've gone, it's been, the staff have been polite, they've helped me get the stuff out, not because they know who I am, but you know, but I've never seen a queue, and I do go down there. Seriously, I do go down there on a Saturday and a Sunday, and I've never seen a queue outside the facility. However, I'm sure that Councillor Ward, who's behind me, has heard what you have said, and he does attend the waste management meetings, and maybe it could be brought up there to see if the hours could be extended. But maybe the odd hour here and there is not going to alleviate the problem that you say that you have, but I have to say it's not a problem I've seen.
Thank you. I'm going to got time, so I'm going to take Councillor Shaw again, please.
Very briefly, Mr Mayor, thank you. Just to help Maureen, on CCTV, just at present, and I don't want you doing some work that's already taking place, we've been talking to the police following Councillor Keir's discussion about cameras. Yeah, we slightly disagree. I think, and I might have got this wrong, Councillor Keir, but I think Councillor Keir wants permanent cameras in a number of positions. We have the view that if you put a permanent camera in there, these children who we know will move to somewhere else. So we're looking at temporary cameras. So we've been talking to the police and the police have given us 5 hotspot areas where they would like to see them. And indeed, one of them's going up kindly your areas, going to put one up down on the bridge going into Friston Village, because it does 2 things. One is it's looking for antisocial behaviour, but 2 is there has been fly tipping down there, and so by linking with the police we're getting the best of both worlds. So thanks to your team for helping us with that, and they are looking at the other areas what police have highlighted.
Okay with that? All right. Any more questions on the portfolio order? If not, then Councillor Ahmed.
It's a question in relation to the Councillor Gordon brought, because there's a definition of race here, and I think it's important that I address it in the council chamber. I wasn't going to, but I put a complaint into the Labour Party and Stand Up to Racism about an individual who was in the council chamber earlier on who made a racist comment about me online, and I'm just wondering if what the policy of the Labour Party is in addressing that, because I've not received a reply back to that yet.
It's not a question I can answer, Councillor Ahmed. I don't know to what you're referring, but if you want to meet with me or send me an email and let me know, I'll give you a full and frank response.
Can I also say I've been told by the legal, it's not a council matter, it's an internal Labour Party response. Okay? Okay then, so that's that one done. Let's move on to the next one, which is the report from the Portfolio Holder for Transport and Highways. Councillor Morley, will you please introduce your report to Council?
Yes, Mr Mayor, thank you very much. Mr Mayor, earlier on this year, the Council held its consultation on the Council's budget. Following on from that consultation, it was loud and clear that the people of the district, one of their main priorities was improvements to the highways network. Mr Mayor, that's loud and clear, but it's not unique to our district, it's unique. Most districts will be saying that. Following on from that, at the Council's annual budget meeting, the controlling group's budget set aside an additional £3 million for the next 5 years, and an additional £50 million of investment into highways repairs. I'm pleased to say, Mr Mayor, that the Highways Department of the Council are now on with that, spending that money, that they are improving the roads. We are trying to make the roads last longer, different courses of treatment on the roads, so I'm well pleased with that. Also on gully repairs as well. Some of the things that we get time and time again at our surgeries, we're trying to improve the state of the roads, but mainly as well, it's not just the A's and B's. The majority of people live on the unclassified network, and that's the majority of our potholes and our roads need repairing. So once again, Mr Mayor, we are on with that. Moving on to agenda page 46, I'm really pleased to see that the waterfront car park has been opened now. Some 180 spaces have been created down there, Mr Mayor. That will support the Rutland Mills development when that comes online. But at the minute it's open there, it's all-day parking, it's £2.50, and the one thing I love about this, it has a beautiful little jewel attached to it called a free city bus, which is free to use. You can get anywhere within the city. It links up with our train stations, our bus stations, so I really want to promote it as somewhere to park, an alternative park all day and get to the city centre and also get to our hospitals and our stations. With that, Mr Mayor, I move my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Morley. Are there any questions or brief comments on Councillor Morley's report? I've got Councillor Cruz.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, Matthew, I was at a meeting with, Highways meeting that I did with Graham West, but you couldn't make it, unfortunately. And yeah, you know this brilliant app that we've got, is it roadworks.org, is it? Yeah? Well, that's a fantastic thing. In Horbury and Ossett at the moment, there's a lot of roadworks going on. Now, the problem I found that I wanted to raise is that the number of road workers that leave roadblocks actually in the road for no purpose and shut the road off because they can't be bothered to take them away. And I've actually seen that with my own eyes. Now, I would like to see them fined for doing that. And you know, I know we can fine them for running over with works, but that's causing chaos on the roads in Horbury and Ossett when they do that, and I wondered if we could address that. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for that, Councillor Crew. It has been addressed, Councillor Crew. You are right. We have inspectors that do go round. You can imagine the size of our district and the amount of roadworks we have with the utility companies using them. It's mass. When we've been having the drop-in sessions this week, we have been raising it with members. Be our eyes and ears. If you see a roadwork that's been completed and the utility companies are leaving the traffic lights there, I know there's a situation in Featherstone not so long ago where they did the same thing. We actually took action against them. They was fined, and we have raised it with the companies, so they do get fined. Sometimes we find quite a lot. We can't be everywhere. By having this app now, I think it's absolutely fantastic. I will recommend to every member the amount of times you get a phone call, or in my case, a Facebook message at 10:30 at night, what's happening on Bar Lane in Stanley? I ain't got a clue. Use this now, you can tell the resident what's happening, and if the work is going over, or they have the equipment on there, we will find them as an Highways Authority.
Thank you. Councillor Cummins.
Yeah, I just want to say it is fantastic. It's a fantastic something for us to use to find out. But what I want to say, and I think I speak for Faith as well, fantastic your surgeries for the highways. It's really useful to be able to sit down and discuss problems with yourself and officers on a pretty regular basis to see what we can actually get done, and maybe it's something we should, all as cabinet members, be thinking about doing for members of this council.
Can I thank the members that have come to the surgeries? I've tried to make as many as I can, but obviously some appointments have got in the way where I haven't been able to attend. But I do believe we've all got highways problems. Some of them are long-term, some of them are short-term, some of them the highways department don't particularly know about. And I'm a bit old-fashioned, Maureen. I like nothing better than sitting around a table and discussing issues. I'm not one for flying emails off here, there and everywhere. So I do thank you for your comments. We will continue to have them every 6 months. I will be asking members if they would like to come back again in December to follow up on what we've been talking about and also raise any new problems. And I'd love to have a street scene drop-in session. That's all I'm saying.
Thank you. Any more comments to Councillor Morley on his report? No. Okay, thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor Morley. A final one, which you'll have to go back because of my script being set out the way it is. You go back to agenda page 31 to get the first ever from the Cabinet Member report for the portfolio holder for skills, digital and technology capabilities. Councillor Graham, saved the best for last.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's very kind of you to say. Sure, it's not true though. I'd just like to say I'm absolutely delighted to be the first person to take on the role as this portfolio holder, and I'm extremely excited. I think skills is obviously a huge and important issue that we need to address and ensure that every resident in all our wards are properly skilled for what the future holds. I think last year with the Centre for Cities think tank releasing that report that told us that Wakefield is going to be one of those areas that are most affected by automation and rising globalisation. So we have got to ensure that we are prepared and we have the right programmes and schemes in place to ensure that our residents are ready for those changes. I'd just like to highlight as part of that, on page 32, we do have the Step Up project, which was going to be launched very shortly. This is going to be a pilot in Nottingley and Ferrybridge, and the whole idea around it is we are going to be offering a service to people, not necessarily just those who are out of work, but those that are in work who want to learn new skills and want to be signposted to how to get there. So whether you are unemployed, whether you already have a job, whether you want to do a master's, this will be a service that you can access and you can get the right information to achieve your ambitions and goals. So it's very exciting. And if that is a success, which it has been in other areas across the country, then that will be rolled out to other areas within this district, especially those that are a priority. And with that, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move my report.
Thank you. Are there any brief questions or comments on the report to Councillor Graham? If not, then thank you, Councillor Graham, for that report. That concludes the portfolio holder's report. We're now on to agenda item number 8, which is to provide the Council with the final outturn position for the 2018-19 financial year for the revenue budget and capital programme. Is the report moved?
Yeah, in moving my report, Mr. Mayor, the purpose of this report is to inform members of the final outturn position for 18-19. But As under 1.2 of setting table 1, the final position of the revenue budget shows a balanced budget against 235 million. This is in line with the in-year reports to Cabinet. With that, I'll move my report.
Is the report seconded? Are there any questions in relation to the report? Councillor Harvey.
Thank you. So on agenda page 61, so 7.3, we understand that the council's reserve has actually increased to £99.4 million since it was reported in February Budget Council. So there is a substantial increase, and I'd like to know whether this increase has qualified for investigation in accounting terms, but the leader has taken the delegated decision actually in order to have it published on the 31st of May 2019. So whether this amendment should have been gone through the council chamber for the members to approve one more time. That's my first question. The second one is on item 7.6, page 62. This £99 million reserve, so when colleagues across the council chamber complain about everything, every challenge we're facing is all about austerity, but we are actually holding £100 million reserve in this council. So there is one on policy development which we hold for 9.0 million. So could the portfolio holder let us know what this policy development is about? Thank you.
Councillor Shaw.
Answer them both together on the reserves. If you follow the reserves through, you will see that apart from £15 million, which is roundabout standard for what we ought to have as what we would know as contingency, right, the rest of them are already allocated to different parts of the cabinet and different portfolios. So because they're all allocated for jobs and for a number of different things. Now, that sometimes changes and it sometimes goes up and down, but that's the reason why you're seeing the fluctuation that you're seeing. But coming back to the 15 million, that's round about the average that the council should do with the turnover that we have as a contingency.
Do you want another question? Answer put your mic on.
I just wondering whether this actually should be presented to the council for approval. That's all, because members should approve these accounts. This is statutory accounts, but the change is £11 million difference from what has been reported in February.
I'll answer that. No, we get reports to the council, and we get end of year, this is the end of year report. So that's what we do, and then we get reports on a regular basis.
Okay with that? Any more comments? Any more questions on the report? All those in favour of the recommendation, show. Any against? Any abstentions? That is carried. Agenda item 9 is to provide the Council with information on Treasury management activities for the year ending 31st of March 2019. Is the report moved? Is the report seconded? Are there any questions in relation to the report? Are there any comments? All those in favour of the report, please show. Any against? Any abstentions? That is carried. Agenda item 10 is to deal with any questions made by members. No questions have been submitted. Therefore, we move on to the final agenda item, which is to deal with any motions proposed by members in accordance with the Council Procedure Rules as set out in the Constitution. There are 2 motions. Councillor Mrs Cummins, would you please move your motion to Council?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Fly tipping is unsightly, unacceptable, inexcusable environmental vandalism. Fly tipping is bad for the environment and bad for public health. It's not a victimless crime and it has been on the increase since 2012. It's estimated that the clean-up operation alone cost the taxpayer some £58 million over the last year. Local authorities have cleaned up more than 1 million fly tips over the last year, which is a 7% increase. Private landlords and farmers are seriously affected too. Nearly two-thirds of landowners have been affected by fly tipping, including farmers and charities such as the National Trust, which experienced 232 fly tips last year alone. Waste is tipped in small quantities or sometimes on an industrial scale, with lorry loads being dumped, blighting our countrysides and sometimes blocking our rural roads. Current enforcement rules, even though councils do their best, are not working, as the increase in fly tipping demonstrates. Fines need to be more severe so that they act as a real deterrent. This council alone has spent £200,000 over the last year picking up dumped items. We've managed through fixed penalty notices to prosecute a good number of offenders. However, prosecuting them is often time-consuming and laborious investigations with a high threshold of proof and at times when councils face significant budget pressures. Consistent and hard-hitting prosecutions are needed to deter rogue operators and fly tipping. One of the biggest issues that we as elected members face on an almost daily basis are electors contacting us about fly tipping. It blights our communities and affects our health and well-being. Councils also need adequate funding to investigate incidents and ensure fly tippers do not go unpunished. This resolution today calls on the government to review guidance to the courts to ensure the worst offenders face tougher sentences. However, I note that the opposition here in Wakefield want to play politics yet again with this resolution. We can all do that. They note that 9 out of 10 areas with the most illegal rubbish dumping are run by Labour councils. These are often areas that have seen their budgets disseminated by Tory austerity. They are the hardest hit by cuts to council budgets. The traditional southern Conservative councils have either received no real cuts or very minimal cuts. They also quote notices served and comparable fines imposed by Conservative and Labour councillors. Not sure where those figures came from, but here in Wakefield over the last 2 years, we've issued 515 fixed penalty notices, which has brought into this council £27,943. We've also had 8 court prosecutions and crushed 1 vehicle. Research has shown us so far that the Tories are hitting the most deprived areas hardest. Barnsley's budgets are down by 40%, Liverpool by 32%, Doncaster by 31%, and here in Wakefield by 30%. The list goes on. These cuts mean that councils have to prioritise their services. 9 out of 10 most deprived councils in this country have seen cuts of almost 3 times the national average. It doesn't take an Einstein to work out that with these cuts, services will be affected. In moving this resolution, I'm interested in helping to improve the quality of lives of residents in our district. The courts have been given the tools to prosecute fly tippers. What we're trying to do with this resolution is to ensure that they use them. That's why I'm urging this council to support our call on the government to review guidance to the courts to ensure the worst offenders face tougher sentences. With councils in England facing an overall funding gap of £8 billion by 2025, the spending review, if it happens, needs to ensure councils have the funding needed to investigate and prosecute fly tippers. I move this resolution.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs Cummins. Is the motion seconded?
Yes, Mr Mayor, I second the motion.
Councillor Ward, in seconding the motion, you may speak now immediately after I've finished, or you can hold that for later. What do you want to do?
I'll speak now, Mr Mayor, please.
Okay, Councillor Ward.
I'd like to second the substantive motion. As Maureen has already outlined, incidents of fly tipping have increased over the recent past to an almost epidemic stage, which equates to a 40% increase since 2012. Whilst in my opinion our workforce deserves praise within street scene and enforcement for exceptional service during this period,
of savage government cuts in resources. They've nevertheless done their best to remove it swiftly, continued campaigns to try to get residents not to fly tip, and to educate them not to engage rogue operators without licences who then scar our countryside, farmland and urban areas by tipping the rubbish, while making small fortunes on the back of this illegal activity. Though there have been some successes in catching and prosecuting these criminals, the available resources and deterrents do not seem to be enough to tackle the issue effectively. Discouraging sentences by the courts do not appear to have deterred those who are intent on making money from defacing our countryside, towns and cities with these constant eyesores and paltry fines. Therefore, one answer appears obvious, in that we need consistent, additional and sustained government support, both by effectively resourcing councils like ours with more funding, and importantly guidance to the courts and their representatives, enabling them to hand down fines, other measures that will first deter and then eradicate these criminals and the blight they inflict on our communities. I therefore second the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Ward. Councillor Ahmed has submitted an amendment to the motion. The amendment has been circulated to members prior to the meeting. Councillor Ahmed, would you please introduce your amendment?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think that we'd all agree that the Councillor Cummins has raised an important issue today in the Council in relation to fly tipping, and it's an issue that's does affect most of our ward areas. And Councillor Rowley knows that we've in Agrig and Bellevue, we've been consistently, a few days ago we raised something, some people, irresponsibility of people that actually cost the council, and actually sends out a wrong message as well in areas. We've seen people chuck out sofas, beds in the back of Olivia's house, different areas of the ward, and then we try to encourage people. Neighbourhood groups have got together and do actions as well. But I know the purpose of the amendment wasn't to detract away from the motion. I think all of us elected councillors deal with these issues around all our areas, and it's an act of responsibility as well. In some cases, there is a certain amount of naivety which we need to address with certain groups coming in, transient populations, where we try to encourage them and make them aware of what's available to dispose of the waste in the correct places. But I think it links in with also rogue landlords as well, where they use the opportunity not to pay for skips, etc., and use that opportunity to say, look, I'm not going to pay that £200-300 and spread that waste in different areas. But I did look at the motion, and I thought that it was important that you addressed that, but I know there's some time constraints to make sure that both motions are covered into some meetings. But so I'll keep the rest of it brief. But I think I agree with most of the motion as it was written, but I did think it was important that there was action on the council side as well in addressing the issue, and rather than just solely relying on government itself. Because I think there's certain things that we can do as a council, because we know that this thing costs a significant amount of money. One sofa wasted away or fridge freezer dropped out in the street costs the council each time it is the collection, and it's a significant cost to the council, which isn't something that the council should be spending money on, but we have to, because otherwise it's going to cause more damage and distress. So I went through simply looking at, councillors' special responsibility allowances on an Excel sheet that I was passed over, and just identified potentially areas, including the leader's allowance, which you can see the entire amount in there, myself as opposition leader's allowance. So not being a hypocrite or anything like that, just simply, if you want to call it politicking, that's your view, it's not on my part. I genuinely put all that money in there, and I expressed that to the Conservative group, why I thought it was important that we did that. So we just, an idea, and then I worked out how much the neighbourhood patroller would cost at the top rate, which is 37 on the weekend, including weekend rate, which is what I was advised by the council the cost would be, which amounted to roughly around 5.5. So I think and I hope that the councillors across this will look at it as a non-political gesture to show that there is something that we can do to show that as elected councillors we're committed to the well-being of our residents. We recognise that fly tipping is an issue across certain parts of our ward, and there is action that we can also do, as well as asking the government to tighten up certain things as well. So the motion, I think, the amendment, I think is an important amendment, and I hope all members will put their name to that and actually push it forward so we can start addressing the issue with some positive action on our side and also hold the government to account as well. Thank you.
Is the amendment seconded? Thank you, Councillor Stansby. Do you wish to formally speak now or reserve your right to speak until later in the debate? Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree, Maureen. Fly tipping is a big issue, especially in my ward, and street scene have been marvellous when we've reported it. But I was still a little puzzled when I saw the original motion, until I realised it was yet another chance for you to use the A word, and you did. I wrote this a while back, but you did, as an excuse for council's failings, yet again. You know, anything that goes wrong, you've tripped over a paving slab, it's austerity to blame. We can't afford to repair pavements, but we can afford to pedestrianise Bond Street, or lay a few thousand bricks on the road just down the road, or put a few, you know, benches down on Westcott. You know, children at risk of harm because of the front door is still not safe, even after a year of increased funding. Again, you blame austerity for that. Anyway, back to the amendment. The figures do speak for themselves, so I don't need to go through them again. You asked where we got the information from. LGA. Despite fewer incidents in fly tipping in Conservative-run councils, 7 times more income has been generated than Labour councils. If you really want to reduce illegal dumping in our district, why not use the suggested savings by Councillor Ahmed, removing spurious allowances and increases in order to fund at least 5 patrollers? The resulting additional income from fines that are imposed as a result could be used to employ even more. Or you can yet again kick the can down the road and issue yet another call on the government. You have control of this council. You decide what we get to spend our money on. You get to choose whether to take that money or to give it back to the taxpayer. You get to choose whether to create a new cabinet post for someone who likes to use Facebook, sorry Michael, or use that money to benefit those who are paying and improve our communities and villages. It's time to stop this showboating and just actually do something constructive, and you have the chance today. About this issue, I don't see how you can not vote for this amendment.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to move on now to ask if any member wishes to speak on the amendment. But can I remind you that any member may speak only once on the motion and only once on the amendment. And members are to speak initially now to the amendment, please. I'm going to take Councillor Graham.
Thank you. Councillor Stansby, I mean, it's one thing I'll never stoop to, so I'm not stoop to, I won't get personal with you, but for you, you spend half your life on Twitter. So for you to bring up social, it's just so petty and pathetic. I'll stick to the amendment, which I am totally against. And the reason being, Councillor Ahmed it is political. He's talking about removing allowances. Nobody, and I'm not just talking on our side, I don't think anybody in this chamber is here for a career. They're not here for the money. You know, as a teacher, I earned double, even triple what I do as a councillor. I'm not here to make money. But at the same time, you do need an allowance in order to carry out the job for how many hours you put into it. I am a very active councillor. I put a lot of hours into my work, as do a lot of people in this chamber. And therefore, I do need something to live on. I can't, that's just the reality of it. I think it's easy to sit back, not attend any meetings and have a full-time job and still claim your allowance. I think if that's the way you feel, give up your allowance because you've got a full-time job and you're not attending the meetings anyway.
Thank you. Councillor Margaret Isherwood.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just looking at the figures. I'm concerned, Maureen, that we have, according to, if I've written them down correctly, 515 prosecutions, yet we've only raised £27 £27,943 in fines. This takes me back then to the actual resolution. We are doing the work. The council is doing the work. It's actually the courts that are not putting the fines in to produce the result. I've just sat here very quickly. This works out at £54 per fine from each case. I don't know how much it costs for the workers to actually put in the work to fetch this to court. So I totally agree with Maureen. We should be looking at the courts doing more and fining more when these people are brought to court.
Anybody else want to speak on the amendment? Councillor Ahmed, as mover of the amendment, do you wish to reply before taking the amendment to the vote?
I will reply. I think it's important that we, first of all, I'll be asking for a recorded vote on this as well. I think it's important that we see what people it is in the total contradiction there. Obviously, not here for the money, but he's, I think it was only one of his Facebook posts bragging about wearing Gucci boots on the clean-up.
Councillor Ahmed, can I just interject there just 1 minute? Can I just interject there? In exercising your right to reply, I need to remind you that no new matter can be introduced, and if you're going to ask for a recorded vote, 4 other members have to support it.
Also, for a reminder for future is also that when the person's speaking on amendment, that's matters that should be raised within the amendment as well. Okay. So in terms of, I think, and some people need to understand that actually an amendment has not detracted away from anything that's been removed from there. So it still actually says the court still should carry out the action in there. So it hasn't removed any of them aspects in there. It adds on further actions at the council. It's funny that the council, the portfolio holders here, do not want to commit the council to carrying out actions internally within their own organisation, but rather happily sit there and say, let's write a postcard to the government. But what the motion does, the amendment does, is allow the opportunity for this council to carry out action and say this is an issue that's been going on for years, probably getting worse actually, and says here, simple things that can be actioned out. So the choice that we make today, and I think all councillors should look, and the choice that they make is read what's written in there, the amounts that are written in there, and vote according to that. So I will be asking for a recorded vote on that.
Okay, it's been asked for a recorded vote. Are the 4 other members please show? I think I've got enough then. So it's going to be go to a recorded vote. We will now take that amendment to the vote to clarify, to see determine whether this amendment from Councillor Ahmed should become the new substantive motion. So it's going to move to a recorded vote. Call upon the legal person to take you through that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As usual, I'll read out the names of the councillors. I'm aware that a few people have got up and left, so if I haven't noticed that, if somebody's absent, if you could please let me know so that I can record that on the sheet. Thank you. Councillor Ahmed. Councillor Austin. Councillor Mrs Binns. Councillor Box. Councillor Byford. Councillor Carrington. Thank you. Councillor Mrs Collins. Councillor Ms Cruz. Councillor Mrs Cummings. Councillor Ellis. Councillor Farmer. Councillor Fishwick. Councillor Forster. Councillor A. Garbett. Councillor Mrs Garbett. Councillor Graham. Councillor Gordon. Councillor Mrs Harvey. Councillor Hemingway. Councillor Mrs Heptonstall. Councillor Heptonstall. Councillor Miss Hepworth. Councillor Hunt. Councillor G. Isherwood. Councillor Mrs. Isherwood. Councillor Mrs. Jeffrey. Councillor Carl Johnson. Councillor Martin Johnson. Councillor Jones. Councillor Keith.
Abstain.
Councillor Keir. Councillor Mrs Kitchen. Not here. Thank you. Councillor Ms Lochran. Councillor Mrs Lund. Councillor Manifield. Councillor Mrs Masterman. Councillor Mrs Mitchell. Councillor Mrs Rhodes. Councillor Mrs Rowley. Councillor Sanders. Councillor Mrs Scott. Councillor Shaw. Councillor Ms Spate. Councillor Ms Stansby. Councillor Swift. Councillor Ms Taylor. Councillor R Taylor. Councillor Tennant. Councillor Mrs Tennant King. Councillor Tully. Councillor Wallace. Councillor Ward. Councillor Wassell. Councillor Ms Whitehouse. Councillor Miss Williams. Councillor Womersley. Thank you.
So the amendment falls, and we now have to revert back to the original motion as set out in the agenda. The debate on the amendment has covered many points. However, does any member wish to speak now on the original motion? May I remind members that speeches must be directed to the question under discussion or personal explanation or point of order. No speech may exceed 5 minutes. Councillor Gordon.
I just thought it was quite important to speak on this motion as one of the main things that I've been dealing with since being elected, and even before that, is fly tipping. It's an absolute blight, and some of the points you've made are absolutely it's incontrovertible, is the fact that it ruins people's lives and it ruins the environment, more importantly. We need to do more on this. The sort of problem that I have with this motion is that in here it talks about making sure that the courts would hand down tougher sentences, and further up it notes that people can actually be jailed for fly tipping. Now, I'm not personally sure that sending people to jail for fly tipping would be the best use of taxpayer money. It's going to mean that, as well as cleaning up the mess and prosecuting them, we're then having to pay for them in the judicial system. And I get the sentiment that we need to make sure that we stop fly tipping, but I just really don't think the actual resolution of a motion is too vague in how we'd like to see people punished harsher. And I think, like has been mentioned with some of the fines, the average fine is maybe around £25 or whatever the figure was. And people need to make sure that they can't continue to repeat offend. But the evidence is well established that if you send people to jail for minor offences, that they do re-offend, and these are typically for worse crimes, more dangerous crimes, and it causes a sort of spiral for people in that place. I know myself, my background is I work as a health economic research assistant, and it's comparable to health in the sense that when you prevent something, this is typically more cost effective and it's cheaper and it stops the problem. Treating something down the line usually incurs a greater expense, and I can completely appreciate that local governments up and down the country have had their budgets squeezed. And again, we come back to the A word, which is something that I think is a little bit used laissez-faire, in the sense that people just keep trying to use it as a justification. And as someone myself, when the coalition government came in, I wasn't actually even old enough to vote. So before we start bashing me, saying, oh, your party, I think we have to be a little bit pragmatic. Because on that same note, if we're going to blame austerity, let's look at the billions of pounds that were wasted on the Iraq war. I'm sure many of you were party members when that happened, and you probably disapproved. So I think we've also got to look at the practical way in which we can deal with this. And I think funding would be better spent restoring household and waste recycling centres like Ferrybridge that was shut down. This was costing tens of thousands of pounds to run, but ultimately we're now probably costing even more in cleaning up the mess. From Nottingley, from where I live, it would be a 13-mile round trip to get to the nearest household and waste recycling centre. And I get that there is never an excuse to fly tip. There is never an excuse for this type of crime, and it is a crime. But at the same time, we have to, like I said on the climate change motion, we need to help incentivise people to make sure that they're doing the right thing. And I think when you've got bulky waste charges and you're shutting down recycling centres, it does send the wrong message. I would very much like to see, if we were to get any more money and the funding gap to be closed, I'd much rather see it used on prevention rather than sending people to jail.
Thank you, Councillor Gordon. Councillor Wassell.
Thank you, Chair. I wasn't going to speak until the previous speaker did, actually. I'm impressed with his environmental credentials, but I'd like to know if I'm procedurally correct in asking for a recorded vote based on him abstaining in the last vote on an environmental issue, which we are still debating. So I'd like to know where he stands on this, because he's just stood up and said he's not sure about this and he's not sure about that. And as an environmentalist, I would have thought it were obvious where you stood. So I'd like to ask if it's procedurally correct to have a recorded vote, and then we'll see what he thinks about this motion on fly tipping and whether people should be adequately prosecuted for fly tipping and blighting the area that we live in. And as regards austerity, it's the areas that are most hit by austerity where we are finding the fly tipping being done. It's because people can't afford the charges that this council charge for shifting bulk waste. And it's much easier for them to organise some unlicensed, unscrupulous person to go and fly tip it in your area, my area, up Airedale, side at Miners Wheel down Weldon Lane, or wherever else they want to tip it. And it's them that need jailing. The unlicensed are locked or fining significantly, and their vehicles removing off them and crushing if necessary. And if that's what it takes to stop them doing it, that's what we're going to have to do. Can I have my answer?
Yes, you can. I've just taken consideration, and you can ask for a recorded vote if you want. I'm afraid you've only speaking once on the amendment and once on the motion. I've got some speakers to come. Martin Johnson, please. Councillor Martin Johnson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I support this motion. Fly tips and clean that mess up. And again, it all comes back to money. And obviously, you know, we can only fund so much with the amount of money we've got. And the opposition here talk about money and how it spends. And yes, what I would say to them, if we could have employed maybe 5 more people, involved people, maybe throughout the district of York, throughout the country, on what Theresa May spent her entourage flying to Brussels on Mission Impossible. How much has that cost this country and this taxpayer?
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. I've got Councillor Mummersley here.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The reason why I'm speaking is basically to me it seems that the issue is in the punishment and where it should be started. By the way, reducing the form of police officer. That's what we have that's what we have lawmakers for, that's what we have parliament for. And I truly believe that it should come from the lawmakers and the punishment should be significant. And I don't think that we're in a position to debate whether it's right or not. The reality is, on my ward alone, I've got a major problem with flight tipping. I've got a major problem with litter. I've got a meeting about it in town council next week. So what I want to say is I don't think as a district council we should be, debating or are we going to pass this motion because we feel sorry that the punishment finance should be put in place to deal with from central government because it is a national issue. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I'd like to raise a personal explanation on the previous
Just a minute. What point do you want to explain?
I was asked a question in terms of my credentials and view on this issue.
It was questioning the fact that you were making a statement about the thing, but you abstained on
About
the
misrepresenting my view.
So you've got a chance to show your representation on the recorded vote. That's what I understand.
That's not to do with the previous amendment, though. I was questioned about
Speaking on the amendment, we were speaking on the amendment before. This is on the motion.
Yeah, and I would like to personally explain how I've been misrepresented through abstaining, but that's not what that was. That was essentially what it was.
I'm going to let you explain. I don't want to take long about it.
Just in terms of what was said, the reason that I abstained on the motion wasn't because that I wanted to see this motion fail. As I've just said in my previous speech, I want to see more representatives. And as is clear on the Labour side, you've got one person saying they want community order and another person saying jail people, which is a complete incoherent argument at the same time. Now, in terms of my view and the previous amendments, which have been misrepresented, the reason I didn't vote for the amendment is I felt it was too political, talking about Conservative councils and Labour councils. It wasn't anything to do with what was suggested. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for explaining that. Councillor Tiller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I again intended to take the issue quietly from it. And to be quite honest with you, I would have bought into the amendment if that 10 quid a week or £10 a day I get from here would have made any difference. But let me just say this. I earn my tenner. I earn my tenner. And I do my fair share in my ward day in and day out. We've got issues, like we had previously, about TV licences. Thinking that you gather in about the whole game council. A few quid off people's allowances isn't the answer. The answer is and council already pointing out. Council we have had 750 plus police officers removed from our streets in the last 10 years. Well, I'll keep moving
What is the point of order? Just a minute, Councillor Tiller. Just a minute. What's the point of order?
Point of order, the members actually speaking on the amendment, which is now not part of the thing. You are not. You should be speaking on the motion and the matters raised within the motion.
Councillor Tully,
I am not speaking of him.
I didn't think you were. Most salient opinion is I didn't think you were, but please refer to the motion.
When we start talking about wasting money, one could make the case that we waste money daily in this country. We spent a fortune today at Royal Ascot so we can get Queen and all the entourage down here. We get no saying. But if you have to like me being a Republican, well, so be it. We'll spend a fortune looking after the biggest housing benefit property in this country, which is Buckingham Palace, and not about an alley. But yet, when it comes to addressing issues in this council, well, it's already been said within the resolution that 60 pence out of every pound has been removed in the last 10 years. Something's got to give. And 5.5 new patrol officers won't make an acre of difference. We have got to get back to some visible policing on our streets and some deterrent and a policy in place that stops people. And dancing around playing politics when you can shift 50 pence off somebody's allowance and 50 quid off somebody else's allowance is neither good nor I support the resolution.
Supporting the resolution. Councillor Harvey.
Right, so let me get back to the issue we're debating. It's fly tipping. I believe it is a serious offence and it is a crime as well. Up and down in my ward, the rural ward, you could imagine what happened in Woolwich. You have a few fridges overnight, few sofas, how the people will drive down those country lanes. So it is a crime. So I do disagree with Councillor Gordon's. But however, we in Surrey government are hard on crime, so right now through. So we will tackle this issue. The second one that Councillor Gordon's recommendation is about the 8 billion funding gap. Okay, I have just actually illustrate that we have 100 million reserve, okay? And it was claimed to be all allocated, but we will look into that as well. So look at the tax raising power the council have been given by the central government in the past 2 years, and also the maximum fine could be go up to £50,000. So I'm sure that this will make enforcement perfectly if we council starting to address the issue, real issue, how to actually work on it instead of how to actually blame other A words. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rowley.
It's around. 70 is around. It's three dictionary, right?
Sorry, Councillor Myers, let Councillor Rowley be here.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Ahmed's right. Yesterday I was looking out of my back bedroom window and a person walked behind the rear of my house with a white divan bed. So he needed to do it twice because it was a base and then it was a mattress. And that's not unusual in Agri. And what we've actually got is a great community group that is trying to alleviate some of the problems we're encountering with this type of waste. But what we actually need to highlight is that however much the council do and however much money they spend, it's actually the individual who is dumping the rubbish that we need to actually dissuade from doing this. We need to shame them. We need to find out who they are. We need to publicise who they are. And I'm not sure whether we have control of whether they get a fine or a prison sentence or not. But we certainly need to give a lot more attention when we find out who they are to actually shame them in our communities because they're an absolute disgrace. And what they're actually doing is wasting valuable resources, whether we've been afflicted by austerity, which we certainly have in Wakefield, but nevertheless, however much money we have, it's an incredible waste of money to be absolutely remedying fly tipping. We need to highlight every opportunity that these people, many of whom have privately rented accommodations, certainly where I live and represent, are actually dumping large quantities of items in our community and spoiling our community. Can I just say that when we looked at the research before, when we did actually have a site in a certain ward, that was where the highest fly tipping was. So the two things do not necessarily relate. What we should be about is trying to shame people by whatever means. When we find out who they are, we need to put them on camera, I think, and highlight that they have been accused of this truly antisocial activity.
Thank you. Councillor Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to follow on from a few points that have been raised once the panels aren't raised. I don't think anybody in the chamber suggested for a minute that somebody that throws a mattress out on maybe one occasion goes to prison for 12 months. What the motions anticipate is that they are available. They are available. And in terms of why we're in our community, where I would actually like to see that enforced is we have unscrupulous companies and people that often you find on Facebook sometimes that are exploiting our residents. Our residents are in good faith hiring delivery companies, men with a van to get rid of their waste in good faith, and then what often happens with that is they are inexploited. And no amount of catching these and finding them currently is going to do anything about that. They're just another guys and they'll start again. And not only are they causing us an absolute mess, they're exploiting and stealing from our residents, because what often residents don't understand is that they're still liable for that waste. So they're putting residents who are in all good faith paying for their waste and disposal in jeopardy of prosecution as well. And I think that's where we do need to get something. You only have to go down everywhere in the streets, any of our old country lanes. We've all got 5 different hotspots. And in an ideal world, we'd have a person on every single one, but 5.5 people, any increase in staffing is not going. You're never going to have a person every time somebody dumps something. And the only way we are going to stop this is by making examples of people. If there's a maximum of £50,000 fine. Whack them with a fine. I mean, often circumstances have to be, but whack them with
Thank you. Councillor Epton still.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just heard people employing men in white vans, unlicensed white vans. Well, in our law, we don't employ these people. They work on it's night time and just throw it out on the street. And that's not just once, that's a regular occurrence. What I think is the people that own these HMOs, these builders are doing alterations and developing these HMOs, will tip their waste anywhere they can. They need fining everything, and if need be, they need putting in jail. So actually, a deterrent. And until we start doing that, we won't get nowhere.
Thank you. Any more contributions on the debate? If not, can I say Councillor Cummins, as mover of the motion, do you wish to reply before taking the motion to a vote? If you do, in exercising your right to reply, may I remind you that no other matter can be introduced.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before I do actually pick up on some of the points, I really do want to pay compliments to our street scene staff who do go out on a 24-hour emergency service to collect these fridges that are thrown over into hedge bottoms, to collect the divans that Councillor Rowley talks about. And I think we will all agree that they do an excellent job in actually trying to keep our district clean. I'll come on to Councillor Gordon's point. We're not going to, and I think it's been said, we're not asking for people who have just been thrown a bin and liner into the gully at the side of the road. We're not saying that they should go to jail. It is an expense that it is about education. But we do have prolific fly tippers who we've caught on a number of occasions, who we do get to court. And when they get to court, it's cost us somewhere in the region of £89 to get them there for a fine that's £250. They can be fined up to £50,000, and the courts are not using that. And that's for prolific offenders, and that's really what I'm talking about. Councillor Johnson brings up a valid point about community orders. There are community orders that can be used that say that these fly tippers should go out and spend so many hours cleaning their communities. I agree with Councillor Womersley. Yes, the punishment should actually fit the crime. Councillor Harvey talked about the £8 billion funding gap by 2025 and then talked about our £100 million reserve. It's hardly £8 billion, I have to say. And yes, the illegal waste traders, and we do try and we do stings on people who are collecting waste with no waste licences, emptying houses and then emptying them into our rural areas. And I know Wakefield Rural suffer, not all areas suffer, but I know more than anything Wakefield Rural, and certainly my ward suffers because we're on the verge of rurality as well, because very often they can get down a lonely lane and it just happens. I mean, on Sunday alone we had 3 in our ward with 3 fly tips, and the best we can do is to get somebody out rooting through that to see if we can find evidence, and very often we find evidence of somebody that is innocent of expecting somebody to dispose of their waste in a way that they would expect. So I hope I've picked up on some of those points. I really do hope that we all back this resolution to actually call on the courts to do a little bit more with the powers that they have, which would actually make the lives of our citizens across Wakefield a lot better.
Thank you, Councillor Cummins. Councillor Watson, earlier on you indicated you wanted a recorded vote. Is that still okay? No? Good job. Okay. Okay, then we'll take this as the original substantive motion. Will all those in favour of the motion please show? All those against? Any abstention? That is carried. Thank you. The final motion is from Councillor Gordon. Would you please move your motion to council?
I know it's a bit more than anticipated this afternoon. So this motion that I put forward, as I'm sure something that was heavily publicised in the election campaign. And up there, we actually allowed members of the public to come and participate rather than just observe. And one of the things that I've noticed tonight is we've also had issues with the live streaming equipment, and I know that was an issue at Cabinet as well previously. So people who aren't here really can't see what's happening. And going back to what Councillor Box said right at the beginning of the night, with his speech on his report, I think what he said was something to the effect, and I'm sure you'll correct me if I'm wrong, is politicians, whether local and national at the minute, trust and faith in us is very, very low. And I think this is a motion that I would like to see everyone be able to get behind to make sure that we encourage people to come to council meetings, to see what we're doing, and also to be able to participate. And that's a fundamental point here, is, and as you can see, we've not got many people in the public gallery this afternoon because, I get it, it's quite a long afternoon, and if you can't do anything, you can't participate, then what incentive is it to sort of come participate? I think this motion, hopefully, if passed, and allowing residents to come and ask questions, will make sure that people feel the council has been more transparent and is listening, and that's a fundamental thing here, is listening to their concerns. And because I know most of the people that I spoke to felt that decisions were being made without any consultation or not enough, and people weren't always able to understand the way in which the council works, and they feel that they can only really vent their frustrations at one time a year when it comes down to local elections in May. And I'm sure everyone in this council chamber has come up against those frustrations. So, in essence, really, it's a relatively simple motion. I tried to keep it brief, and it would just allow local taxpayers to come here, hold us to account all year round. And one of the things when I was looking into the background of this, other councils in the area already have similar things in place. I know Sheffield, Calderdale, Kirklees, and a lot of other councils allow a public question time in effect. We don't allow public question time. People can't come here and ask members questions on notice. Not to the camera, it's not to the camera. It's not in the standing orders. There's no set provision.
It's all right, no worries. Councillor Gordon, please continue on moving on.
Yep. So like I said, currently under the Constitution of Wakefield Council, people cannot turn up to council and cannot ask questions to Cabinet or to legal of council. That is something that is not a provision that we have. This motion would allow that, and I think if people vote against this motion today, what we're doing is we're slamming the door in their face. We're saying, don't bother coming, you won't be able to speak. We're silencing people when trust in us is at its lowest, and I don't think that's a good look for anyone. So I would like to hope that we can have support across the chamber for this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gordon. Is the motion seconded?
Mr. Mayor, I second that motion.
Thank you, Councillor Kay. Do you wish to formally speak now, or do you want to reserve your right to speak until later in the debate?
Yeah, I'll speak now. The reason I'm supporting this motion is really very simple. Given the increasing number of people with disenfranchised in politics, both locally and nationally, it's our duty to become more accountable to the people that elect us, to our positions. It's a responsibility of us all to ensure that we give the public every opportunity to speak to us at all levels. This is a fantastic opportunity for us all to make it happen. It would be remiss of us to deny the public this opportunity, and that's why I support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Kay. Councillor Ahmed has submitted an amendment to the motion. The amendment has been circulated to members prior to the meeting. Councillor Ahmed, would you please introduce your amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to echo what you mentioned, both councils mentioned are quite important. I think sometimes as councils we get used to certain procedures, being here a long time, and certain things that we come to accept as norms. And sometimes we have to address them and look and say, are there different ways of working the council meetings and making sure that there's a better way that we can engage with the public as well within council meetings. We do that election time and we board work anyway. So what we've suggested today in the amendment is self-explanatory, but it allows us the opportunity. The Wakefield district has many different parts, and I've worked in Nottingham actually in a youth service a few years ago. It would be nice to actually go to them different parts, South Emsall, Ossett Town Hall, and venues all around, and actually start taking the whole council there and actually start doing it in other venues as well, like Pontefract New College, Wakefield College, areas in the public where different parts of the public can engage in council meetings, rather than just holding them at certain specific times, which we've always done, so we've always carried on doing it. So it's a good opportunity for us to have a relook at the whole, the way that council meetings work, and hopefully all members will actually agree that it's a good fixed council to say that, look, it's an opportunity for us to go out in different parts of the district, many different parts, Castleford, Hemsworth, all the different parts of the district, and also look at different times of meetings as well, and make sure that other people are able to take part in the meetings as well. So I think we should hopefully accept the amendment and ask for support for some change.
Is the amendment seconded?
Seconded, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Stansby, do you wish to formally speak now, or do you want to reserve your right until later in the debate?
I'll reserve for the front.
Okay. Does any member wish to speak on the amendment? And I'm going to say once again, the members are reminded that they can speak only once on the motion and once on the amendment. So does any member wish to speak on the amendment? Okay. Let's move on then. Councillor Ahmed, as mover of the amendment, do you wish to reply before the amendment is taken to the vote? In exercising your right to reply, may I remind you that no matter can be introduced. Okay, we'll now take the amendment to the vote then. Clarify, this is to determine whether the amendment from Councillor Ahmed should become the new substantive motion. Please show all those in favour of the amendment. Please show all those against the amendment. Any abstentions? On that, the amendment falls, and we now revert back. On that, the amendment falls, and now we revert back to the original motion as set out in the agenda. The debate on the amendment has covered many political points, no it hasn't. But does any member wish to speak on the original motion? May I remind members that speeches must be directed this time to the question under discussion and to either that or a personal. Must exceed 5 minutes. Who wants to speak? First, I've got Les Shaw, I've got Olivia Rowe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I think what we could all agree on in here is that we're all Democrats. No matter where we come from or what background it is, we all believe in democracy, we all believe in communication, passing information out, and that side of it. Some of us do it better than others, and there's laws and everything, right? Before we start to vote or anything, I think what you should understand, because I don't know whether you do, and I'm being genuine, what the council already does, because there's a number of things that we do. Members of the public are welcome, as you know, to attend cabinet meetings, so they can come along to cabinet meetings. Some of the cabinet meetings, it's just a one way, I accept, because they obviously can't interact. So what we did is we started doing cabinets on tour. Cabinet on tour is just exactly what you're asking for. Because what happens is we have a cabinet meeting, which usually doesn't take very long, and then we throw it open to the public. But we go to them. Because one of the issues, and I understand, seriously, I don't counsel here, I understand that, I know you'll agree with me, a lot of people in here won't want to come out of there. So guess what? There's one at the back, I think there's one in September, coming out on tour, in City Centre, Castleford. We've got more chance of them coming downhill than we ever get them in. And so what you do is, we do give them a chance on that side. We've got minutes and decisions that are published on council website. We've got a forward plan that we publish all the time, 4 months in front, so that people know what we're thinking. And they can come and talk to us, and they can come and debate with us. Either the sort of thing we're talking about, or certainly they're coming towards, and I get people coming and saying, look, you know, why you're doing that side of it. We've got independent members of the public that are appointed to serve on committees, audit committees, school committees. We do sometimes get the same sort of people, but we've been working on that
I know Graham and the team done a hell of a lot to try and get people from all sorts of backgrounds into those areas. I've got a list here, and I'm looking at the time, I'm not going to go through. We've got a list of a number of different things on everything from struggling to what to do and all that side of it. And what worries me isn't your values or what you're trying to do. I'm 100% for that. But what really worries me is I don't think that a lot of people would want to come into this chamber. They'd far like us to go like we do to them and actually sit down, because we get more out of that. We do get some debate in those areas. And I think it's real key that we understand. We try with those websites. We have a budget time. We have a website that actually puts it out there that says, look, these are the budget areas, this is the funding, what do you think? And people do. They go on it. And they follow it through, and then it's marvellous. Some of them have come to me, and some of us have come along and said, we didn't realise that if we spend that money there, we ain't got it to spend on that. Well, you know, that's the things that we face all the time. So if we're really serious about communication and about involvement, what I suggest is we're doing a lot of that. And what I'm really concerned about is people coming here. I'm not concerned about coming here, I'm concerned about the fact that the won't come here will get less engagement than what we do now. So because of that, and only because of that, right, I'd have to go against the motion, because I'd rather do the sort of things we're doing and maybe grow on the back of those with any suggestions that's on the back of those rather than going forward.
Councillor Rowley.
Well, first of all, Councillor Shaw's alluded to the fact that I think the Cabinet on Tour events have been very successful. They've been all over the district. We've had a very good attendance. People have asked questions to the Cabinet members and hopefully received appropriate answers. I believe as councillors what we should be about is representing our electorate. And so to actually ask them to come to a council meeting, which can be intimidating, will lengthen the meeting considerably, when in fact what we should be doing is working in our communities to get the feelings and the views of those people and meet them on a regular basis. And I feel that we should be doing a lot more of that. And many of us have been committed to this for a long time. But the one thing that I can no longer do, which I did when I was a much younger councillor, was to say to people, yes, I can alleviate your homelessness problem. Yes, I can help about the situation where you're waiting because of social services demands. Yes, we will clean up the area. And it's all right saying don't mention austerity, but all those things have been taken away as roles of council. We're not building enough houses. You've seen the reports, there's the housing paper that went to Cabinet last week, an acknowledgement that there are still 28,000 people on the housing waiting list. We're not meeting the needs of so many elderly and disabled people because our budgets have been cut so considerably. So on the one hand, we can go out and talk to people, but what we have is a very frustrated electorate who are not getting what they want because councils are not being funded adequately.
Thank you. Councillor Morley.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, this proposition, this motion, I think it's like 15 years, 20 years too late in respect. It's a bit old hat. The way we are accountable today on social media is far better than any sort of public meeting or coming to this council, this intimidating council chamber. As a local member, Ward 15, standing out with East, myself and my two ward colleagues, we are accountable for our Facebook pages, for our community groups, for our surgeries, for our street surgeries. That's how you should be accountable. And I also take the view if you're going to get Mrs Jones from Formal Street in Wakefield North coming to see Councillor Morley at this council meeting to ask why no drain hasn't been emptied or cleaned outside her house or why the road has been done, I won't know that. I don't know that detail. So I have to say, sorry Mrs Jones, I'll write back to you. Don't drag the ball into this council chamber. No reasonable respect. You're better off by the local residents communicating with their local members. They're the ones who knows going on the wall. They're the ones who need to be raising questions in the council chamber. I think that is the best way forward. I do believe it's very old practice that the Liberal Democrat Council for what he's proposing. I am against it. Mr Mayor, we're accountable through social media and encourage all councils to be accountable through social media.
Thank you. Councillor Womersley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just want to say I'm against this motion for the simple reason. I agree with all the comments already been made by the other councillors. What we do at Wakefield at the moment is when we have the town council meeting, we talk to members of the public. I personally, as a district councillor, am going to start doing a newsletter which will be teaching parts of the community, libraries, shops, where people haven't got social media can pick up these newsletters. The other thing is, Councillor Morley said, social media. I think, you know, we've put a lot out there. I just think that to invite people into a meeting like this, the logistics will be really, really hard. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Womersley. Councillor Fox.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Gordon quoted me correctly when I mentioned about local trust in politics. And because it's late, I won't mention Nick Clegg and tuition. That was one of the issues that, in many ways, really started the local trust in politics. There are two issues, I think. One is, what is the role of council? And the other is, how do we engage with residents? And, you know, Councillor Gordon is right. In Newcastle, they do have that system. And in some parts of Yorkshire, they do, in some parts they don't. So it is different in different parts. I've always taken the view that the specific role of council, and that is to question cabinet members. And actually, the questions of cabinet members answered beyond their reports. It's on anything within their portfolio. So I think that's really good. We've also got questions to myself that last 30 minutes, which sometimes I feel is 29 minutes too long. And the other big issue, one of the real reasons for having a council, is to debate the way that we deliver services. Now, much as I may fall out with Councillor Ahmed on occasions, I defend his right to say that we Conservatives think there's a different way of doing things. That's democracy. So I think it's a place where we exchange, sometimes pretty robustly, let's be honest, different ideas about the way that this council is run. And that's as it should be. The second issue is, how do we engage with residents? And I think we have to try two separate issues. Why would we ask people to come here, all the way from different parts of the district, to ask the question actually that elected members can ask for them? Or that, as you know, Matt says, they can actually email us. And most of my complaints I get now from constituents are actually by way of email, rather than by people coming to the advice surgery, actually. An interesting Leslie mentioned this. I've agreed a press statement today that Wakefield launched a new people's panel for residents to get involved. So what we're saying is we're looking for residents to join the first ever people's panel to help shape services and develop ideas. And I think that is a really good idea, pretty innovative, and that is a way we can find out what people think in an atmosphere in which they feel comfortable. So for me, I think the point you made about engagement is actually correct. And I guess the debate is, where should it happen? So I agree with Councillor Womersley and other colleagues to say that I don't believe this is the best way, the best forum in which to engage our residents. I think that we do need to do a lot of engagement on a regular basis to make sure that trust in politics comes back. So that would be my view. Keep the two issues rather than trying to combine together.
Thank you for that. Councillor Alan Gardner.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I was going to point out that in the part of the street sections that are not being referred to, so we carry on that.
Councillor Wallace.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Some of the things have already been said that we have the representatives, people to come to us and carry not just public arena, the council to raise it, with cabinet members, we can do, and also raise cabinet members. At other times, about the people's panel, because I picked you up this morning, I don't know if you know, but it's already on our website, on the council website. I didn't know this till we're just gathering this morning, so it's a good idea. It means that we can have that the public can have a say in shaping transmissions through questionnaires and even maybe invite them to follow school. Any residents of Wakefield district can apply for the panel. I'm just going to say about our council meeting. We do have agenda item 5, which we have used, and that's if anybody's got any strong views, any organisation's got some views, we can send a deputation to this council chamber where we do listen to them. So we are letting the public listen to us. And outside of the council meeting, we said we've got cameras, so to which as local members we go along and we can pick up issues when it's in our areas, for local issues. I don't think it's simply, I know this is the amendment, but I don't think it's simply the council because people, I think people want it to be in one venue at one time where they know where it's at and they're not going to find out where it is. And the council does cover the whole of the district, not just one part of it. I just want to say about people in the gallery, because that's always been an issue about me, is why don't we have a lot of people in the gallery? I think the ones who do come make up for the, they give us the quality, make up for the, they give us the quantity, make up for the lack of quality. I did look on Las Vegas, one website, but yeah, loads of people in the gallery, loads of people, and I thought, how do they do it? Especially when the council meeting, being American, were very short, just basically which company's going to do what, fewer councillors. But when they finish the council meeting, they then have awards for the best firefighting team, awards for the best citizen of the month. That's why the public gallery were all looking at awards. So, yes, so I think the resolution's got noble ideas. I think it's noble ideas that we do engage with the public is quite right. But I think the logistics of it, we're already coping with it the way we do it. We don't need to invite people in on the streets.
Thank you, Councillor Wallace. Councillor William.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think most of the points out of the rest have been raised. As far as I can see, we do have the facility on the current agenda for members of the public to ask questions. It's called item 10 and it's questions from members. I always thought part of my job as an elected representative of the residents in my ward was to listen to them, see the questions they were asking, and then answer them on their behalf, provided talking to cabinet members, talking to the leader, talking to officers. We can then ask questions at any time, not just once a month at the full council meeting. We get the message back quicker. This motion to me seems to be basically reneging on the responsibility of being a local councillor, and you're asking the members of the public to come along and do it themselves. I'm sorry, that's not my idea of being an elected representative of the people in my ward. Thank you.
Okay. I've next got Councillor Graham Michigan.
Very briefly, I was the same for Zoom. We took a view years ago now, to sit there and have a survey and not come and use what is frustrating, I suppose. What we took the decision to do is to go out with the people that actually work. And I know for a fact this week we will have conversations this week, like this time tomorrow, with a few members of the public. said having a question, so I find it a bit unusual to drag people all the way from Nottingham to come here when they can actually go to a meeting in Nottingham. You know, or whatever. I mean, as I say, I know I will pick up tomorrow at our coffee morning with 200 people in and out. I will pick up a dozen complaints that I will then forward on to either the cabinet members if I can't deal with it myself or members inquiries, and I will get that response. I wouldn't ask an old lady who would be refused to get on and read the train because she's in a booking. I wouldn't dream of asking her to come in and get it. Because that's what I believe after what Jackie's saying. That's what I'm here for. I'm here to represent my election. But why don't you have a word in being put here and say, can we have a cabinet meeting in Nottingham? Then people can do it. It's not rocket science, is it? Oh, sorry, I'm talking rocket science. Sorry.
Councillor Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to sort of outline quickly why I won't be supporting this action. Whilst I am not willing to decide what comes back in, I am very much, that is one of my ideals of the council. I'm very much trying to put my disagree or not, I will always be able to be honest with them. And they shouldn't have to feel like they have to come to a meeting like this to get me to listen to them. And they certainly don't. And I've proved, along with my colleagues, my time with the councillor, 3 o'clock in the morning, they're going to be quiet, people need to me, they can contact me, I was there for the night, making sure they're in nursing accommodation. Any of the big issues that have gone on 24 hours a day, what I'm worried about, saying we'll have a sort of open it over, but beginning to the end, obviously not in the detail, which is in the video, which would be more helpful, is that less people will actually be heard, because it'll be the ones that shout loudest get seen to. And what we don't want is a situation where constituents are coming here to council business, shouting about personal issues, thinking that this is how they have to get heard. And then we've got a situation where people are discussing casework on a live feed. There's all sorts of issues surrounding GDPR and that as well. And I just worry that what we're going to do is, and we all see it, and I certainly do in my meetings, and I know other members do, you get the same people come in every time with the same issues, and a lot of time is spent dealing with those instead of actually everybody who needs your help. And that's why, he says he tried to keep the motion brief, really there's nothing there to say how we're going to tackle any of these things, and I think if we're going to make a bigger change to the standing orders, we need to actually know how and why are we going to tackle all these things.
Thank you, Councillor Collins. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Earlier on, I seem to have heard that Councillor Morley used the word intimidating in this debate. So I'm just wondering what is intimidating in this case, or who is intimidating? The people sitting in the gallery ask a question, or the councillors across the council are intimidating, or you feel intimidated? So this council, we don't want to be at the wrong side of the history, because the public question is actually have cross-party support, and there are few councils, as we have already acknowledged, Newcastle, Bradford, Kirklees, Holderdale, and we have Derby, Sunderland, Sutton, Hertfordshire. So the list is not exhaustive. So I wonder why we cannot, first of all, give the opportunity to highlight to the public that it needs not be ignored any longer. The second one, I think, is opportunity to demonstrate the commitment to the public scrutiny. Okay? So this is an issue that the scrutiny of the incumbent administration will be support a direct channel for people sitting in the gallery. And that is the reason why it should be done, I think. Thank you.
Councillor Morley, I'm going to let you explain yourself now.
Mr. Mayor, we're going to see the season now, if it's time the debate was wound up. Councillor Harvey, everybody in the council chamber, we're in a Victorian council debating chamber. It's an intimidating chamber. Believe you me, nobody on that side of the council chamber intimidates me, and I welcome any public questions that come along to me at any meeting, and that's what I meant. The room is intimidating.
That's what I took it to mean.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I don't think anyone suggested that notice, I think it would be very advisable to allow the members of the public to do that. Because sometimes, not always, but sometimes, you know, ward councillors are not visible and they're not well known.
Councillor Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I think this has been taken up a bit more seriously than what it was. I don't think it was meant to be in a case that's reneging on our councillor duties. I don't think it's anything to do with that. I think it's simply just engaging the public that may want to come in here, and I don't find it intimidating at all. I find it fascinating. And I should imagine a lot of people would like to come here. There's nothing wrong with that. It also, as Councillor Box was saying earlier on, there's a big problem with trust in politics at the moment. Let people come in and see how we deal with this, you know? What's wrong with that? It's got nothing to hide. Yes, but be part of it. Be part of it. I understand the concern about shouting out questions, the same question, or abusive or anything like that. This is why, you know, these questions were going to be already on notice, you know, rearranged with permission. That to me is a good thing, and that's something that I would have supported. Councillor Gordon, I wanted you to know that you better do it, because I was going to do that myself. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tully.
I think a lot of these things said about that, there's a public gallery there. If there is a case strong enough in our ward, they will come here and we will support them. And we can go back to the install situation, we can go back before that. In that early 2000s, 1990s, when we were closing the centres down in Emsworth, places for our disabled and some of our downs, children and adults, and we brought it here. There is ample things being said today about accessing us as councillors. My phone is on silent. We've been in here since 2 o'clock. I've got a problem having to stop while I make it, that's what it takes. I have got 11 missed calls on my phone. We're busy all day long dealing with issues. If people want to come and engage, we have never stopped a situation where it's been the Wakefield Women, the Justice for Mine Workers, or any other organisation. It's been Wakefield Trinity campaigning, coming to this public gathering and listening to the debate that takes place here. There is ample opportunity for members of the public through their elected representatives to make representations to council, and it has already been alluded to, at scrutiny, at cabinet meetings and elsewhere. And all them who've been situated, if we're not careful, it will have a single issue situation where we'll end up and we'll get no business conducted. And even in that great Palace of Varieties down in Westminster, down there, there is a public gallery. There is no public access to speaking to MPs on the floor of the chamber. Councilwoman has alluded to it in the town council, very much a small setting in my town council. We have an open session between 6:45 and 7 o'clock on a Monday night to give the members of the public the opportunity to ask questions. I accept it's on a smaller scale. But these meetings are private meetings which allow the public to attend. They're not public meetings. Also lose the sense of why we're here, why we're elected to come here, and it all becomes a nonsense. And I think there's ample opportunity, and it's already alluded to, organise the street changes, get out into community centres, get out into local market, and talk to people about their concerns and bring them back here, and this council and the office of this council will listen to what you've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tully. Councillor Foster, I've seen your hand up, but I've just got one person to fit in. That's Councillor Lawson, please. Sorry, good. Is that what you were going to say? So it's seconded by you. So we're moving to the vote. Is that okay? Right there. So we'll now take the original motion. Sorry, I'm going to ask does Councillor Gordon, do you get a chance to speak, or do you want to move to the vote? Councillor Gordon, you should have, as mover of the motion, you wish to right to reply before we take the motion to the vote. In exercising your right, I must remind you that no new matter must be introduced. Thank you.
Sorry to interrupt. Can I just raise a point of order?
Yes.
My understanding is that when the vote is put, the motion down, we have to vote.
Okay.
The right to reply, it says, you'll have to signal in the fact that
I understand, Mr. Mayor, it's probably saying it's right to reply, but they're all
that's fine. I'm sure it'll be something better to stick on the focus thing. But
no, just
I'm just checking. Okay. What I should do is take that as a closure motion from Councillor Wassell, seconded by Councillor Foster, and I'll take the closure motion to the vote. Okay? This is not about your thing. If the closure motion goes on, then the debate is closed. Will all those in favour of the closure motion please show? Will all those against?
No, it's closing.
Closing the debate is what it is. It's not closing the production, it's closing the debate. So, all those against, can you show me again? All those against. And any abstentions? So, it is now moved that we go to the vote on the substantive motion. Is that okay? That was the closure of the debate. We're now going to vote on the motion. Okay? Will all those in favour of the motion put by Councillor Doyle, please show. Will all those against the motion please show? Any abstentions? Is there any abstentions? Thank you.